I'd like to call to order the April 19th board work session for Methacton School District. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. The public is hereby advised of audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. I do have some executive session announcements. There was an executive session held on March 23rd, 2016 for the matter of contract negotiations. There was an executive session held on March 29th, 2016 for matters of personnel regarding professional, support, and administrative employees. There was an executive session held on March 31st, 2016 for matters of litigation concerning property tax appeals. And finally, there was an executive session held on April 6th, 2016 for matters of personnel regarding professional and administrative staff. In terms of attendance this evening, 7 board members are here. Mr. Phillips and Mr. Boardman are absent. And next on the agenda, we have recognition of guests and scheduled speakers. Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. This evening we have several presentations. We have the Wrestling Room Project, the Methacton Digital Learning and Instructional Evolution, and the preliminary budget update. We're going to start with the Wrestling Project. I'll ask the board members to remain in their seats here, and then we'll move to have you take the audience once we get into Mr. Sosnovic's presentation and going forward. So the Wrestling Project. If it's okay with the board, I'm just going to go up to the podium and start the presentation. This evening, I want to present the Methacton Wrestling Project. We met approximately a week and a half ago with the property committee of the board, and I explained that in my pursuit to acquire private contributions in support of the high school athletic field project, I approached a prospective donor who in turn had significant interest in supporting Methacton, but in a way that had more direct impact on his family. As such, our conversations led to a meeting with the high school wrestling coach and several parents from the high school wrestling program. They shared their interest and passion for the construction of a wrestling room that would help pave the way to grow the program and provide an appropriate practice facility for the high school squad and the community youth programs. This one meeting was followed by several other meetings in which a sincere and coordinated effort has emerged to raise the projected funds necessary for the construction of such a practice facility. Posted to the agenda this evening are those 3 options that were rendered to provide guidance on structure and associated cost that can be used as a guide for our discussion this evening and for the group's work going forward. The coach and the parent group are currently focused on option 2 of that posted presentation. The construction of a wrestling room does have immediate benefits for others. Picture the current space occupied by the wrestling program and imagine a wellness center with free weights, machines, cardio, and a number of other cross-fitness options to support all Methacton athletic programs and all students. Further, imagine that wellness center and ways we can incentivize our staff to participate in wellness activities that contribute to longer health and lower healthcare costs. There are no definitive plans at this point, just ideas, and I just shared one simple one. I'm sure there's many other thoughts of how we can maximize the use of that space for instructional as well as other athletic opportunities. But have no fear. I think my administrative staff and our staff at large have the creative juices to take a hold of that space if it became available because of the construction of an additional space for the wrestling team. Please also know that this project was considered in light of the fact that the district is just coming off a major athletic renovation project, and knowing it is unlikely for the district to fund another such project in recent times. The coach and several parents are here this evening to share their perspectives and to allow for questions from the board. They are seeking the approval of the board to allow the group to begin soliciting pledges to fund this projected $2 million structure. Once they receive approval from the board to begin soliciting funds, they will seek the assistance of the Education Foundation to help collect the funds and manage the donations. I ask that once they secure half of the funds, the group should return to the board to begin conversations towards actual construction drawings and future potential actions that may be needed. So this evening I have a high school wrestling coach, Mr. Anthony Maida. He'll come forward, and he's also welcome to bring any of his parents with him as well.
Patty's here, but I think I can probably...
Okay.
Thanks for getting me on the agenda, everyone. I appreciate it. Thanks to Dr. Zerbe. He's been really extremely helpful sort of walking us through this process. I think he did an excellent job of summing up where we are, and I think I guess the parents and I feel that we really can't go forward anymore with this project, the proposal anyway, until we ask the board's permission to go and seek pledges for, and it's a Mr. Andrews pointed out, it's a pretty ambitious goal. We're used to raising about $800 at a car wash, so this is certainly a different number, but we need your permission to go out and have conversations and make this pitch to interested people in the community that might want to support a project like this. So there are numerous benefits not only to the program, but obviously, as Dr. Zerbe pointed out, to the school and the community at large. There's health and safety issues that I feel we'd be addressing there. The benefit to the wrestling program is it really does secure the future. It's a way to sort of honor our past, and we're a pretty competitive team, and we've been a pretty successful team here for the last 50 plus years. So I feel like at this point, though, it was appropriate, I guess, to come here and ask that we go out and have conversations in the community. It's one thing for the Methacton wrestling parents or the Methacton wrestling coach to pitch an idea to someone using our name. It's something quite different to leverage sort of the expertise and the experience and the name of Methacton School District and then that of the Education Foundation. So if there are any questions about anything about the project, I'd be glad to answer. And I think you do have, everyone has a handout of exactly what they're talking. Okay, great.
We had it posted. We shared the information with the board members. So are there any questions from the members of the board?
Sure.
And forgive me if Dr. Zerbe already said it or it's in the handout, but I just wanted to clarify. So we're looking at $2 million, but first $1 million would be raised before, and then we talk more? Is that what the summary of it?
Yeah, to clarify that is the group led by Coach Maida will be responsible for raising the private contributions of $2 million. The thought is, however, that when the first $1 million is raised, that we would sit down with the group again, talk about construction documents, bids, and other timelines associated with the potential reality of the second $1 million to be raised and how that might fit into the process.
And if you had said a parent came forward wanting to donate a significant amount of money, can I know where the starting point is so I know how much more has to come?
At this point, I can tell you that we're not even talking numbers with people because I don't think that was appropriate before getting the approval of the board to say you can go out and solicit for donations. So I don't have a number that I can give you that someone has said. I've had several people approach me and say, we're interested in this, but I haven't talked dollars and cents with anyone because frankly, I didn't have your permission to do so.
Okay, and maybe I misunderstood. I thought there was one parent who said, I'm making this up, I have $200,000 and I promise, like, that's our starting point. So there isn't that.
No, there is one potential large contributor that is interested in the project that I'm aware of, but we have not talked dollars at this point in time. So I think the starting point, in all fairness, is 0.
I mean, I'll throw my 2 cents in. We talked about this at the property committee. To me, there's no downside here, right? If they can raise the funds and improve the school through donations, and we can turn back other space that can be repurposed, whether it's for a wellness center or other activities in the school district, this is nothing but a win-win for the district if they can raise the funds. I think the threshold of $1 million raised before they can start any kind of construction drawings is appropriate. But we need to, go in with our eyes wide open. It's a big sum of money to raise. Even if we get some, working kind from some of the donors, who knows how it might come. But this can only be a win-win if the district doesn't have to put out any money.
And I know this isn't up for discussion, but since you didn't ask a question and made a comment, I agree with win-win, except I worry about the time it may take away, but if it's just parents. And I would also note, I'm very upfront. I'm a teacher. I care about education. I would imagine you also have an opinion on this based on your background, which is great.
I don't understand your statement. Okay.
One question for you. Is there a proposed timeline? Obviously this has been talked about quite a bit. We know it's going to take a while, depending on what our thresholds as a district are for how much you have to raise, but...
It's a good question. The parents that have kids involved in the program now would like to see their kids in the facility. So I think the danger you run into is if you start something and don't put an end date to it, you could graduate out your interest in doing something like this, right? So the recommendation of Dr. Zerbe when he met with the parents group from the wrestling program was that that the board, the district, put a time frame to this and say, meet these numbers by certain dates so that we can, move forward. And if you're not able to do that, then you're not able to do it. So I think that would be the appropriate way to do it. I wouldn't want to be, for example, I don't want to owe you $1 million in 5 years, right? I want to make sure that if we're attempting this, that we can actually accomplish it in a relatively short amount of time, or the time that the parents involved, and because they're really the driving force behind this, that those parents are still in the program.
So I think with that said, the issue is a chicken and egg issue here for the group. They know of, they've done a lot of legwork and shared with me, their potential ask list. And so they're ready to go, but the problem is they really can't go and ask somebody without our approval. And maybe this timeline, maybe we say, do we set some thresholds, within 6 months, we need $500,000. That way, we can keep track of whether or not we're progressing quickly on this matter or not. I mean, maybe, I'm just throwing a time frame out there, but I think that they'll know early on, probably within a good 3 to 4 months, whether this is going to be a possibility, because they'll need to hit those large contributors. And those large contributors are the ones that are really going to make it happen. They'll probably go back to the alumni and get 1,000 here, 1,000 there, and so forth. But there's going to be a handful of people that are going to really step up to really make this happen. So I'm open to suggestions on how we can time this, but we need to either give them the opportunity to ask or say no. I mean, that's kind of where we're at, and I don't know how to really do that without maybe saying, you got to the end of the school year, or you got to the end of or September 1 to tell us where you're at, and if it's not an amount that's over something, then we ought to put this to aside. Because we know, having gone through a recent construction project, that not everything goes as planned. Okay.
And Dr. Zerbe, that kind of gets into my next question, which is not necessarily directed towards you, but in terms of a district, how comfortable do we feel going out to the public? Because, we talk about the wrestling boosters, and, there could be a couple large donors out there, but you're basically going back to the same pool of residents. We're still trying to get donations for the field project. We have collected, I think it's somewhere around $750,000. Original goal was 1.7 million, I think was what we had hoped to collect, and then we bumped it to 2 million. So do we worry about going to the same residents and asking for money for possibly 2 projects at the same time?
So just to clarify where we're at with the capital campaign under the field renovation project, we did move the pendulum to a $2 million request, which puts us about $300,000 short of the goal, the pledges goal. And so that while we have pledges of nearly $1.7 million now, we don't have that in actual contributions, because a lot of those donors, including some of our more high-profile donors, are doing that over a course of 5 years. But we do expect that with proper follow-up to get that money. And we do, as part of our capital campaign committee, which met, I believe we met this past Sunday night, we feel that in the very near future, once we get the approval of signage through Worcester Township, we think that we'll be in a very good position to use advertisements to help fulfill some of that gap that exists right now in that realm. So I think we're on a good path. I think we're going to attain our goal. And so I think that very shortly, if they're able to garner the support of those large donors first, and come back with, we got a substantial contribution from 2 or 3 individuals, I think then it's maybe appropriate for me to come back to the board and say, you know what, we ought to then also let them go out and get some of the support from the regular, the non-large donor potentials. So will it impact us? I think we've pretty much, our campaign will likely end sometime in November with the capital campaign. But we know that advertisements will be something that we'll be working towards, and that will be an ongoing endeavor for us. But we are on a target to meet our $2 million goal by November. It's really felt that any further beyond that time frame, it's very unlikely that we'll receive significant contributions, because we'll have installed the donor wall. We'll have had some possible field naming ceremonies, and a lot of that stuff will come to more or less a closure.
Well, what's the plan then? Are we going to then get some more information from you, Coach, and maybe get an idea, timeline, fundraising timeline? Just as I know personally, I would need to see something before I say go ahead. I mean, I'm with Scott on this. I think it's a win-win for everybody, and more power to you if you can raise that kind of money. That's wonderful. I would think maybe if you could get some type of timeline, at least something to shoot for.
Sure.
And then at the next board meeting, we put it up to a vote and let's go.
I'd be happy to put something together for you. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Is that
Yeah, I just wanted to raise the question about boys and girls. And the last project we did, I know the girls used the fields and all, but significantly that was a boys' project. This is, I think, probably most likely a boys' project, although I know there are girl wrestlers. And I just wonder what the impact is on girl athletes, knowing that we would be spending so much money on the boys, as it would be perceived, and do we have any issues with the laws regarding that?
I appreciate your comments, Brenda, but maybe it'd be helpful that maybe there's a misconception, and I wouldn't want you or anyone else to have a misconception that the field construction project was designed more for boys and girls. I believe that there's one sport that there's a boys' team that there is not a girls' team. So football is from my understanding, and I know we have our high school principal here with us, I think football is the only sport we have. We have field hockey, which is a female sport. We have lacrosse, which is both. We have soccer, which is both. We have basically baseball and softball. And so that And track is,
Volleyball is just girls?
I'm sorry?
Volleyball is just girls?
Yeah, but I mean on the fields. So we're just talking about field construction. So I think actually, now that I spoke out loud here, I think it's an equal distribution. But people may perceive it different. I think football, I think you're right in the term that football kind of, we had people in the public here drove it, okay? No question about it. We had a gentleman every board meeting say Friday nights for high school football. I understand. But I just want to be clear that it does support all of our programs. In fact, there were 2 fields for softball, which is only played by our girls. So, and the field renovation project that assisted the varsity boys baseball team was really not part of this original project, and there were no funds used by the district to have that renovation done. So I think in the end, I think it was a fair representation of both genders, both sexes, and I'm confused. We just spent the policy committee meeting talking about this, and I am now I'm confused. I just want to make that statement. So the question, however, is with wrestling, it is solely a sport dominated by boys. However, that's why when I talked about the wellness center, which is not a done deal, it's not even, it's only just an idea. But what that really does is it takes an antiquated weight room that currently exists and primarily is used by football and wrestling, and it's a very small space with free weights, and it's not attractive to the rest of the student body. And the wellness center, if that's what we end up doing with the vacated space, will be something that can be accessed by all students. There's talk about opening that space up possibly for the cheerleading program. I think our high school principal has a lot of different ideas. We need to flesh those out, but until this becomes a reality and people start asking for money and we start looking at really construction plans, it's not worth our time to really, spend dreaming about what that space could be used for, because, it's not a reality at this point.
Kim or Paul? All right. So I think that we're looking for a timeline moving forward, and then are we talking about the possible large donor list in terms of the next thing, or are we just looking for a timeline at this point?
I just want a timeline personally.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a timeline with maybe thresholds, dollar thresholds.
Dollar amount thresholds. It's something to shoot for.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Would it be appropriate for me to bring that back for the next meeting? We have a meeting on the 27th.
If you guys,
is that something that we can work on?
Absolutely, between now and the 27th. Yeah, sure.
I mean, to me, the sooner we get it done, the sooner you guys can get going on this. So,
And that's what, and that's what we're looking for the board to put it, give us a green light and go out and, solicit those donations. So, yeah, I'll work with Dr. Zerbe over the next couple of weeks to get that timeline for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach. Yeah.
Thank you.
The next on the agenda is the Methacton Digital Learning and Instructional Evolution. Mr. Sosnovic, I'll ask the board members to take their seats in the front row.
Every time I do it. And I'm tired of this.
Mike, did you put it on the Chrome browser? Log into your email quickly. Log onto your email. Why there? Now you're going to want to go to the link. That's right. That's right. Cut it over. Yeah, cut it. 1 second. Here, try this. I just send another one to you. So you're going to go to present as soon as it loads. I got you. All right. Hello and welcome. My name is Troy Sosnovic. I'm the Director of Technology, Safety, and Child Accounting here at Methacton. It is my pleasure, our pleasure, with Mrs. Judy Gallagher-Landis to present Methacton's digital learning and instruction evolution. This presentation has been reviewed at 2 previous Education Committee meetings. So before I begin, I'd like to extend an invitation to any member of that committee to do this presentation for me, since you're well versed in it already. I don't see anyone standing up. All right, so let's get going. I use this graphic. I really enjoy it because I feel that as Methacton, we're on an ever-evolving journey, and we're going down a road together. And I want to share with you our journey relative to learning and digital learning and instruction. So tonight, we're going to review Methacton's evolution with respect to technology usage for instruction and learning, discuss where we are today, and then share our recommendation for the future. The final slide, which you'll see, is that we are requesting board support to move forward with a one-to-one digital learning environment. So let's talk about where we've come from. Our evolution really started in 2013. That school year, we implemented a district-wide wireless, and that was a game changer for us. That allowed us to really start to rethink the way of instruction and learning is done in our classrooms. We were able to bring forward mobile devices. We instituted student network accounts. That way they could get access to online resources. We could provide them YouTube and other various online things. In addition, we started to really focus our professional development efforts to support technology integration, really pushing into the classroom with our tech integrators, doing co-teaching, supporting teachers in their evolution from traditional instructional practices. We implemented what is known as Mets Connect, and there's pretty many new board members, but I think, Herb, you remembered the Mets Connect presentation a couple years ago, and that was our first look at tablet devices at a K-6 level. We went around, mounted all the smart boards and projectors in the classrooms, and then upgraded our infrastructure in preparation for future projects. 14-15, we expanded on the foundation that we set in the previous year. We implemented BYOD for high school students and all staff, which allowed a greater increase and influx of devices to be used within the classroom and for instructional purposes. We also started GAPS, which are not GAPS, but GAP, which stands for Google Apps for Education. And that was the productivity suite, if you think of it synonymous with Microsoft Office. So Google offers a productivity suite for education. It's free, called GAP. And that includes slides, docs, sheets, which are same thing as PowerPoint, Excel, Word, those type of things. In 14-15, we've really started to recognize a shift in our instructional practices and started to then think about our learning environments and how can we make what we have more flexible of a space? How can we use that space to be all things for all students? And that's really, the start of it was at the Source at the high school. We actually rebranded the high school library to the Source, and the librarian there is no longer known as a librarian, she's known as a sorceress. And that was a thought process where that space and that flexible learning environment can transform into any type of space that a student and or teacher needs. If they need a quiet study area, it's there. If they need a larger group area to do project-based learning, it's there. Flexible furniture, etc. We also then extended that project to the high school, where we've rebranded the high school to iLearn. And we'll talk about what iLearn means in more depth, and actually Ms. Gallagher-Landis will expand upon the iLearn concept and the pilot that we have going on there in the high school currently. Our professional development started to focus more in GAF because it was so encompassing, and we developed a certification track for teachers to give them some intrinsic value in attending professional development. We expanded the Mets Connect program in K-6 because again, we look at the whole district and the approach to evolving relative to instructional technologies, and we wanted to make certain that decisions that were being made in the future were representative of data that we were gathering during these projects. We started to focus in on core content areas at Arcola regarding certain device uses. So, for example, we rolled out Chromebooks to ELA, some iPads to math and science, and started to do professional development behind there and see where that was taking us in preparation for, again, future years, and to make sure that we understood how those devices were being used by our teachers and how we need, and identify where those knowledge gaps are so we could fill them. We, again, extended, and it was really a project continuation from the previous year of the network infrastructure upgrade. So this year, it's been no less busy. So we keep moving forward, and we started to expand our iLearn project here at Methacton High School, where we started looking at additional learning, flexible learning environments. For example, the Commons, you've seen what's been done there. The library auxiliary area, we've changed that into a more flexible project room, the CSR. And now we've extended it down, this whole project down to the Skyview Library, where that branding, I'm still out on it, but it's really it's sold over there. I don't know if I have any traction, and I'm just one voice, but they want to call it the laboratory. Because the laboratory, excuse me, because that focus is more on a makerspace design where kids can actually touch, create, and use different tools to explore their environment and technology and science and all those other great things. We implemented this year our baseline survey to help guide us moving forward regarding our readiness as a district. So we instituted a Bright Bites survey, which was a company called Clarity. They have a product called Bright Bites, which is a research and analytic survey that ties to national standards relative to technology readiness in the K-12 space. That was afforded to us through the IU as part of being in their consortium, and we extended that to all grades 4 through 12 and all teachers throughout the district. We continued GAF, professional development. We formed a student advisory council this year at the high school. So we said, we're a service model in technology, right? And I think everybody in the room actually in education should think from a service perspective. We are here to serve the students and give them the best education that we possibly could give them. So as being our largest group of users, we felt it necessary for us to create a sounding board where they could give us back feedback on projects that we're rolling out, and that was the Student Advisory Council. So we've used them as a sounding board, not only for just technology projects, but also for curricular projects as well. Dr. Katona can reach out to that group and say, hey, what do you think about this? And they would give us that feedback, and they've given us a lot of good suggestions so far. What the board approved, I believe, in December, January timeframe was the new iLearn courses, and that material is still being out for reviewed, and that was in concert with our whole iLearn project, which you'll learn more about. And then we established and initiated the elementary vision for technology this year. The next set of slides, we're going to focus more on the one-to-one Chromebook pilot that took place at the high school. And for that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Mrs. Gallagher-Landis, and she's going to go through the iLearn, what it is, what we've learned, and what our students and teachers had to say about it.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. So the big reveal, what is iLearn? iLearn is actually not associated with Apple. They have iBook, iTunes, everything is III. You'll notice we're using a capital letter, and really what this stands for is it's an acronym for Independent Learning, Environments, and Responsible Networking, which is really an overarching philosophy of what we want to try to create in our children. Is we want them to be independent learners anytime, anywhere. We want them to be able to use the tools at their access to be able to gain information and make decisions. We are currently involved in changing our environments, and certainly we want to try to make sure that they're responsible networkers, which is an ongoing battle in our digital environment. So it's basically a byproduct of this overall vision that we have for our teaching and our learning, and it's supported by technology. For over the last 3 years, it's sort of evolved. The thing to remember really is that philosophically, technology is a tool, it is not instruction. Instruction is still done by teachers, and technology provides them with another tool that they can use in their arsenal for trying to teach kids and meet kids where they are, and that's kind of the most important part. It provides them, obviously, opportunities to enhance instruction. Some kids are very visual, so it gives you access to be able to do that. We have some of our kids who are still trying to learn English as a language, and it gives them immediate ability to be able to translate some of the things that are happening in class so that they can be a more engaged learner in that space and not have to go somewhere else in order to be able to process that information. It also facilitates the growth of them as lifelong learners. I don't know how many of you have dinner with your kids, and if there's a question that's asked, in 2 seconds they've Googled it and they're giving you an answer. I know it happens at our tables all the time, and I'm sure that you're not immune to that as well. And then, of course, it really supports the idea of STEM skills, which emphasize all the C's, creativity, communication, collaboration, citizenship, and critical thinking. And again, I can't emphasize enough the fact that it's a tool for teaching. This is about a learning initiative that we're engaged in, not a technology initiative. Technology is our supports to that. So what we did is we figured we needed to try to see what was happening. There's a lot of research, there's a lot of people that are doing this, but they're not Methacton, and we're a unique community. We have a unique community of learners, and we wanted to see how it was going to impact us directly. So what we did is we selected 4 teachers across all 4 different subject areas to see what the impact would be depending on what the subject area was that was being instructed. And what we did is we picked just 2 sections for each one of those teachers. So they're teaching 2 sections that actually have a Chromebook, and they're teaching 2 sections that do not have a Chromebook, so that we would be able to do a comparison and remove the teacher as the variable, because it's very difficult to compare apples and oranges already, because you have different classrooms or very different personalities of kids. But this at least eliminates that instructional difference that's based on the personality of the teacher. So we're going to be able to compare these 2 different groups to each other as well as to themselves. And then, of course, we wanted to include all different academic levels. So we have academic or college prep courses, we have honors courses, and we have AP courses that are involved in this. And we also included all 4 grade levels to see if there was a certain grade level of learner that used it differently, or was enhanced differently, or was inspired differently. So all in all, we have about 170 students that were a part of this pilot program that we've been running. Each of those students, at the end of the first marking period, were actually assigned a Chromebook that they could have 24/7, just as they would a textbook. And the parents were actually, we had a big meeting with all of the parents that were involved, and they had the option that they could either take it as 24/7 access, or they could have the child leave it behind in the classroom and only use it during class. And we had 100% of our parents opt to go with the 24/7 model. So we've been watching, and we've been talking to students, and we've been talking to the teachers who have been involved. We've been engaged in professional development throughout the year. They've been engaged in doing professional development for us to help their peers come up to speed with where we are. And again, it's really provided us with all of these different things. Greater differentiation for our students, more collaboration among students and teachers, both in and out of school, because they're able to communicate much more effectively in and out of school. Many of our students, through the Bright Bites survey, indicated that they share technology at home, so they don't always have access to the laptop because they have to share it with other siblings or they have to share it with their parents. This Chromebook gives them the ability to have something that's dedicated to them for them to be able to use. It's also helped us with formative assessment, and formative assessment is really the ability for a teacher to, on the fly, ask questions and glean information about where students are at that moment, whether they're understanding the material or not understanding the material, so that it can either be retaught or they can move along because kids already get it. It lessens the redundancy in a room and also enhances the ability for that teacher to manipulate the instruction to better access the differentiation for those students. The enhanced communication, again, because they have it all the time, opportunities, and of course, student engagement. You put a digital device in front of a kid and it's hard to pry it out of their hands after a period of time. So that's been helpful too. So these are just some of the statements. We actually have short videos. We have several different videos. They're much longer than what we're about to show you. The link will be posted tomorrow to Agenda Manager, so if you do want to see the videos in whole, certainly I would invite you to do so. But again, for time, since we still have another presentation, you have a whole meeting yet to go, we're going to cut them just a little bit short. Can I
just click the video? Well, that video is not playing right now. Not a big deal, because you see what some of them are saying, and we'll see what the issue is with the YouTube link, and make sure that the video is live for your viewing tomorrow. Forward, the one on.
I wanted to give them a chance to read them. So in addition to having statements by the students, we also have statements by the teachers who have been using it, and teachers who are not using that don't have the one-to-one in their rooms, but have also been impacted because the students who have it in one room are moving them into other rooms. So it's really sort of forced a lot of the teachers in the building to come to grips with the fact that they're going to have this technology, and it's really enhanced and motivated them to learn more about it so that they can use it. Right now, we've been engaged in professional development, and teachers are definitely grabbing onto it and running. You don't think it will either?
No, the hand didn't change over.
Okay.
So that's what we saw locally. So we did this pilot, 170 students. We observed what the impact was locally. So we wanted to share with you the national and other research that supports one-to-one initiatives. So Project Red is a nonprofit organization really put together to help schools make educated decisions regarding technology investments and programs. They had a one-to-one, they did a one-to-one research project which investigated computing programs across American schools. They surveyed 997 principals and technology coordinators, and here were some of the salient findings. Schools with one-to-one computer ratio, or student computer ratios outperform non-school one-to-one schools on both academic and financial benefits. Technology transform interventions are the top model predictors of improved high-stake test scores, dropout reduction rates, course completion, and improved discipline. And we definitely saw the third one in ours, which are online collaboration increases productivity and learning. What we've done here was included that study if you wanted to read it in its entirety. So that was a national organization reporting on it. What we also did was we then went to peer-reviewed research. So here's some research studies that have been conducted by individuals that have highlighted some additional salient points about the benefits of one-to-one. So studies suggest one-to-one programs produce a positive impact on student learning engagement through the improvement of student motivation. You'll see when you research one-to-one initiatives a lot, the Pinnell study, because this was a seminal study. What Pinnell did was she took a number of studies and then reviewed them and looked for themes relative to the benefits of one-to-one initiatives. So what she reported was that these studies that she reviewed showed that improvements in student learning outcomes, proficiency in using technology, literacy and writing skills, motivation, collaboration, engagement, and participation. And again, those are all things that we saw again in our pilot. And then the final one is my favorite of the three, because it's easy to just quickly think about the student when it comes to a one-to-one initiative, because it's one device for one student, but there are a lot of value and benefits that teachers also have. And this one spoke about the benefits of teacher practices when regularly used in the classroom. And again, for your review, we've also provided the references of each of those studies. So we put this together because we wanted to highlight that this is not a fad in education. It's not something that's just a hot topic and it's going away within a year or two. Here are neighboring districts to Methacton that are already engaged in one-to-one learning environments. It's important for me to note that a number of these districts have been doing this 5+ years and actually have extended their one-to-one program as low as first grade. So this is, again, not a fad. It's not going away. This is just how education is evolving. And this is the next logical step for us to move forward. So with that, our recommendation is that for the 2016-17 school year, we begin establishing a one-to-one learning environment leveraging Chromebooks. So why Chromebooks? They increase instructional time as a result of an 8-second boot. Their battery is a continuous use battery that'll last 8 to 10 hours, thousands of free resources, maximizes our Google Apps environment. No more missing or lost files. Everything's stored in the cloud. If something happens to that child's Chromebook, they could log in to Chrome using their Methacton account on any device and have access to all the same resources they had on that particular Chromebook. The ability to use remote administration and management eliminates the need for software deployments and other imaging. So how's the rollout going to look? So what we're recommending is a 3-year phase-in rollout. So what we suggest here, and let me just explain the graphic. So we've color-coded it and also then labeled it accordingly. So the first cycle of machines that would go out are representative by the letter. And then the number represents the year of service of those machines. So year one of the initiative, which is the 16-17, we'd have A1. Those A1s would go to A2, so they would follow the kids. Again, the students have access to this the devices for 3 years continuously. As you move down this waterfall, you'll see that there's an A3 that should be there, but actually we've moved it up to the 9th grade because we still have 1 year on that particular lease of those machines. After the 18-19 school year, we call that the program stabilization year, whereby all grades 7 through 12 are in a one-to-one learning environment. What we would do moving forward would be every 7th and 10th grade student would get a new device that year. That device would be leased for 3 years and then returned as part of that fair market value lease. So then if you think about it, a student gets it in 7th grade, has it for 7th, 8th, 9th, they would then get it again in 10th, get another one in 10th grade, 10, 11, 9. The only anomaly, again, is that in that 18-19 year where we would have to use the 12th grades from the previous year to backfill for the 9th grade, but it's still, it's not an issue. So what are the support scaffolding other than what we've already discussed? Again, I just wanted to highlight the professional development pieces. Our integrators will continue to leverage the SAMR framework, and I had Dr. Zerbe send in a board note, a Friday board memo, what SAMR was and gave you some information on it. And that's a framework, a continuum of enhancement and transformation in respects to integrating technology in the classroom. So if you look at it, substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition. To give you a quick example, if I got a Chromebook, substitution would be, my students used to take notes using pencil and paper. Now they take notes using the Chromebook. That's a substitution phase. Augmentation would be, now we're going to have all of the students work on a class set of notes synchronously online at the same time and contribute. That's something that you were not able to do with the pencil and paper format. Modification would then be, we're going to start to form study guides and groups using the collaboration tools as part of Google to begin preparing for midterms or what have you. And redefinition, I'll give you an actual real-life example that happened during midterms. We had a teacher, Mr. Foley, contact us and say, and he was one of the members of the pilot, and so he shared this story with us. He said, we had a student that was really sick with the flu. That student was scared to death to miss the review for the midterm coming up. So what did that student do? That student remoted in using the Chromebook as part of the pilot, and it still attended class and was able to participate in class and get all the things as part of that review. So that's where that's the redefinition. That's something that was never attainable before with any of the previous tools that we had. We're going to continue to use Google certification to do a Google certification track this summer. It was wildly popular last summer, and we're already getting a lot of solicitation at the professional development office for us to continue that. We're going to build an online space for teachers to share instructional strategies across departments and grade levels, and then our additional opportunities, as we always provide, through MIAC, ISSS, and in-service training throughout the year. You'll see the work continue up there a lot because we've been doing this for a number of years in preparation of this, and we're just going to continue what we're already doing and is working well. Other supports, so let's think about our students that might not have access to the internet at home. Well, there's two things. One, the Chromebooks can be used in offline mode. So they could still be used, and then once they come back to a Wi-Fi connection, let's say school, it would sync up all their files. However, we recently reached out to Comcast to refresh our knowledge on the Internet Essentials program, which is an unbelievable program for this community that gives families who qualify for the National School Lunch program for free and reduced lunch, the ability to get internet for $9.95 a month, and that includes free installation, tech support, and all of the hardware that would go with that. In addition, they can also buy a laptop for a subsidized rate of $149. So it's an unbelievable program that our community has the ability to access, and we've been actively promoting it. We put a lot of literature out in the buildings, and we've created videos on it because we want to get the word out. We're also going to be developing student-driven help desks. We feel that there's a number of opportunities where students are interested in technology, and they would like to help each other and gain real-life skills in terms of doing break fix or tech support under the supervision of teachers and/or technical staff. The Chromebooks come with an accidental protection plan, which allows for one warranty claim a year and free battery replacement a year in case. So for example, if a student drops the Chromebook or spills milk on it or something like that, there's a claim, one claim a year that will allow them to get that remediated at no cost. Again, as I mentioned, a Google Cloud Management really allows my staff to manage this whole thing seamlessly, and then our technicians have been trained to service Chromebooks to help offset any type of costs associated with repairs that go beyond the first accidental payment or claim. So here's the next three slides are probably the ones that you're thinking about right now. So what's this going to cost us? What we're looking at in terms of cost projections are in the 216 we would go out for a lease, and we're not asking for any additional money. This would already be money as budgeted but re-provisioned, and I'll highlight on that point in 2 slides from now, re-provisioned to move down in this educational model. The annual lease payment, if you calculated out a 3-year fair market value lease at 3%, would be $92,000. We used October 1st student counts to calculate this, and then we just kept rolling those students for the subsequent years, and it includes the device and warranty costs. So if you look at 17, 18, 18, 19, the accrued annual payment then increases because you have the previous lease, and then in year 3 you have 3 payments going because you have, in effect, 3 leases that have been out. And again, we highlight this as the program stabilization year because once it's fully rolled out, this is what we can expect that we would have to make in terms of an annual payment and what we would go out for a total lease every year, moving forward in perpetuity of this program. Now, I'm going to say a couple things here. It's important for me to highlight that the fair market value leases that we've been getting relative to technology have been at a 0% rate. We have been really getting attractive lease offerings. We put the 3% in here to show you a conservative number. In addition, technology is only getting cheaper. The price of the Chromebook that we are speccing out has already reduced $40 since last year. So that trend is just going to continue to go forward as well. So these numbers we believe are, again, conservative estimates that we don't believe will be greater than what's being shown. So how can we offset that cost? What we're recommending as a part of a second resolution tonight is that we implement an MSD technology fee option. So what does that mean? For $48 a year or $4 a month, and half that for students that qualify for free and reduced lunch, families would be able to pay into this technology fee, and that would give them the permission to bring home those devices 365, 24/7. They would have those devices to extend their learning outside of the Methacton walls every day. If you look at what other districts are doing that have rolled out one-to-one programs, from the list that I was showing you before, annual technology fee ranges from $30 to $90, and many of them also don't have an accidental protection plan that covers damage or repair. So families, when that happens, they're incurring additional cost of $50 to $100. What I'm recommending, again, is with that accidental protection plan, the device is covered for one claim a year, and it is also covered for 3 years, one total replacement, meaning if the kid dropped it out of an airplane and it's completely unrepairable, they will replace it for free in the term of that 3 years. We are currently negotiating with the company to get 2 claims a year for the accidental protection, and I feel confident that we'll be able to do that. So, if we use the technology fee to help augment the annual lease payment, here's what our commitment would be as a district. So, how we calculated the technology fee is we looked at the free and reduced lunch rate for October 1st, which was 15%. And then we said, all right, if 90% of all the people involved in this program participate in the technology fee, this is what we would expect in terms of cost. So you could see our annual lease payment from two slides ago, less the $32,000 of the technology fee, shows an annual commitment of $60,000. If you look at the program stabilization phase, we can expect as a district to incur $168,000 a year in lease payments, where I'm confident that that $92,000 would be closer to 100%, or not 100%, but $100,000. And I say that because I use another conservative number in the estimation, which was 90% technology fee participation rate. So the districts that we visited and have been working with and talking about as part of them helping us to formulate our thoughts and learning from their mistakes, they said that their participation rate is upwards of 98%. So again, we showed another conservative number. The other piece that I wanted to highlight before I move to the final slide is that my impression from conversations that I've had and presentations I've had in the past with the board is that we are going to maintain our current level of technology that we have here in the district. And for us to do so in Methacton, relative to Arcola and the high school, we have a number of devices, desktops and notebooks, that are either aged 8 to 9 years that are becoming non-functional and also will be coming off of a lease. We will, no matter what, if we wish to maintain our current environment as it is with mobile carts and desktops for the students, have to make an investment around $675,000 in the next 3 years to just replace and refresh that equipment. Now, what I'm suggesting, and I think would be the most impactful instructionally and fiscally, would be for us to shift the way that we handle technology and move toward this environment, this one-to-one learning environment, because for a commensurate dollar value, every student will have access could have access 24/7 from 7th grade to 12th, where by the current model right now is teachers sign out carts and bring it in on as needed basis. So with that said, push the wrong button down here. So with that said, we are asking for the board to move forward with 2 resolutions in the April 2016 school board meeting. We're asking you to move forward from this meeting and put on the agenda for next week the following. Approve the administration to establish a one-to-one learning environment for students in grades 7 to 12 to be phased in over 3 years beginning with this 2016-17 school year at a projected annual lease cost per year as follows. The second resolution is for the board to approve us to establish a technology fee annually per student in grades 7 through 12 who are issued the one-to-one learning device and chooses to utilize this district device outside the regular school day, i.e. take it home with them. The regular fee is $48 annually and $24 annually for students who qualify under the National School Lunch Program for free or reduced price meals. So with that said, that was the final slide, and I'm sure that you have some questions. So, Dr. Zerbe?
Because of the setup here, I'm asking the board if they would return to their seats so that we can use the microphones and capture the dialogue, because I'm certain that there's some questions.
Beats heels.
I'd like to open up the questions that the board might have.
I'd like to start, please.
Sure.
Troy, you know I am all for technology, 100%. I mean, I badgered you for months to get all those smart boards mounted. Remember going back there a long time ago. But I have a couple issues with this program.
Okay.
First of all, I think it is very good. I think it's a great idea to bring something like this into the classrooms, if anything, to only enhance the use of the Google apps and to use all that stuff. My questions are, though, a lot of it has to do about bearing the costs for this technology fee, okay? This is something that the school district wants to bring in on a multi-grade level platform. In other words, from 7th all the way through 12th grade, correct?
Yes.
So you're talking a good chunk of kids, okay? Right now, parents are battling school tax increases, pay-to-play activity fees, and now we're going to ask them to pay for technology. But my question is this technology fee only apply to those students who take the Chromebook home, or if they're issued it regardless?
Okay, good question. Yes, that is accurate. It is only going to be, it's an option, as the slide suggested. So if the family wishes for their child to take the Chromebook home, they can partake in the technology fee. If not, this child would still have access to the technology. However, they would drop it off and pick it up every day at a designated location in the school. So they would not miss any instructional opportunities with the Chromebook during the day, but they would not have the ability to use it for homework and other type of learning outside that school day.
Okay. What percentage of students were you thinking that we're going to take these Chromebooks home?
I'm guessing 95 to plus.
Okay.
98%.
I would venture to say that's a very, very high number. Reason I'm thinking that is because of a lot of the kids already have laptops, PCs at home, okay? They can access all their Google Docs online, correct?
That is accurate.
So everything that they can access on the Chromebook, they will be able to access at home when doing homework.
Yes.
Okay. So the Chromebook's main purpose would be, as I see it, as a really, really good tool to use in the classroom, as an aid to the teachers to help instructional value. Okay. I do not think it should be that the district should look at this as a 100% or even 95% participation in the kids taking them home. I, for one, won't. My kids have, laptops at home that we've already prepped them with, and they're using them at home. Okay, whether they store their docs locally or on the cloud, that's however they're being instructed at school. That's fine.
Sure. Could I address that one point?
Yep.
I just want to highlight that we did do a Bright Bites assessment, and part of that assessment asked questions about home use and access, and the percentage of students that responded that that have technology at home is high, but that technology is being shared by many members of their family, so it's a competitive environment as well. So if you have multiple kids trying to use for homework, let's say a shared laptop or something along those lines, that's a reality for a lot of our families.
Right, and that's what I was going to dovetail into my next point, is that this program will alleviate that and provide an option for families at a relatively low cost to have that problem solved. I still think that that tech fee, we should try to figure a way, and I'd like to see also where the dollars are going to come to fund this out of the leasing. I understand we have, laptops and PCs that are on constant rotation and lease, and if maybe stop those to bring these on board, or stop iPad rollouts or whatever.
So let me address that and add a point of clarity. When I explain what we would have to make in as an investment into our current environment, if we wanted to sustain what we are right now, that is, in essence, what we're saying. Instead of spending that money in that way, we're going to use those same leasing dollars and now shift it toward this model of instructional technology. We're not going to make investments in any desktop labs, other than, let me just clarify, specialized areas like art that need Photoshop or AutoCAD and Ed Tech. But the desktops in the libraries, the classrooms, they're all gone. The mobile carts, they would all be gone or re-provisioned down to Skyview or other areas that would, until they're up on their lease.
K-6, right? K-6 would still have those options.
K-6 is a different structure.
Right. But we'd still have to replace those pieces of equipment in the normal rotation scheme.
Yes.
Okay.
They don't use carts and stuff. They have an allocation of number of devices per classroom. It's a different model than the high school.
Okay. My last point is, I believe, and I didn't write all the numbers down, but I think you said it was about, well, okay, I'll finish on that part. It's about $100,000 in technology fees is what you're looking to collect. It was like 90,000, I think you said.
92,000 in the program stabilization year, correct.
So that's going forward, 92,000 a year.
That is also correct.
Okay. And then the program stabilization year, you're looking at 237,000.
Yeah, and that's, again, those are projected estimates based on our current student population. I took the October 1st PDE submission for the counts and just rolled those numbers. So that's why you saw a delineation from year 1, 2, and 3.
So that 237, if that technology fee was not collected, you would add that to that?
No, that 237 is the lease.
That's
that we
the
would
lease.
go out, yeah. So we have...
so where's the technology fee would be applied to?
So in the one slide, I showed the lease schedule and then the payment for each lease. In the second slide, I showed what we would pay annually for the lease payment, less the technology fee.
Right. So the 237 is the gross, I should say, because then you would take the technology fee out of that you would collect.
Yeah, I'm just
bring it down to 160, 170, something like that.
Let me just say, let me see where you're getting 237, 1 second.
Third year.
Yeah, so third year program lease, we would go 237. That is the amount of money we are requesting to lease, but the payment for that would be less annually because it's spread over 3 years.
I think that, last question. BYOD, bring your own device,
yes.
still goes?
It would until the third year, and then we would not allow students to bring laptops to school, but we would allow them to connect their mobile devices. Because what we want to create here, and the best practice model in education, is to create a ubiquitous environment where there's a guarantee level footing for all students to have the same tools in the classrooms. We don't want one student bringing a $1,500 MacBook Air in and then competing with someone that just has an iPhone 5.
But you're going to have the Chromebooks available to all the students anyway, so.
Well, I would hope so if you guys approve this.
Well, in the hypothetical that we're proposing, then they would not, but you would still have access for their mobile devices like iPads if they needed to bring it in for
That's
a
right.
variety of reasons.
Yeah, iPads, like mobile tablet devices, phones, but we would not allow them to bring laptops anymore.
Okay. Now, my last question is whatever the final amount that we need to collect, is this budget neutral? Is this something that you're able to pull based on not replenishing those PCs and laptops?
That is correct.
What is that annual cost? What is our annual lease on the budget? Do you have an idea of what that is right now?
Stu? $1 million.
About $1 million.
Correct.
My personal opinion, I think it's a great plan, but I think we need to figure a way to get rid of that technology fee. If we truly want to make this a educational tool that the kids can use at home, not impact the families in any way, shape, or form other than being responsible, teaching the children to be responsible for these pieces of equipment. I think that, dinging each and every student, some kids have 3 or 4 kids in the family, each one of these, it's going to add up. So I really think, with our $100 million budget, going back to the board here, Finance Committee, or working with your budget, is to figure a way to do this without that technology fee. It's also one less hassle that has to be even considered when looking at this, okay? You mentioned paying online. Well, there's a service fee online. Pay online, so it's more than that. And I also wonder about the damage waivers and things like that. Things are going to happen, especially if they're taking them home over the summer. I mean, you said 1 incident per year per device.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I'm negotiating 2.
Do you have a replacement cost on what these Chromebooks are right now?
Retail value of the Chromebook itself is, I got it on my spreadsheet here, excuse me. The retail value of the Chromebook currently is $216. That does not include the cloud management license and/or the warranty.
Okay. So if a kid drops it in the ocean,
okay,
that one's taken care of, but then he drops it out the window of a school bus.
Right.
That one's not. He has to pay for
the depreciated value of that device over 3 years.
3
So if he
years.
did it in year 2, it would be
Right.
whatever that depreciated value would be. Correct.
Okay. All right. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the 3rd time I heard this presentation, so I had all my questions answered already, which I had similar questions to Mr. Roth. I guess I look at this from a different perspective. I look at this as, oh, thank goodness, because I have 3 children that will be in 7 to 12 at one point, and I'm thinking, oh, thank goodness, because I don't have 3 devices for 3 children, and we already have a slight problem at the lower level. And I appreciate Mr. Roth's concern about additional burden to the families, but I think about, and not everyone uses these things, but bats. I don't know, I've heard $200. My children don't use bats, thank goodness, for their safety. Instruments. So when I heard this, I looked at it from a different perspective. I'm happy to hear Mr. Ross, but I was like, $48? Sign me up, personally. And I would imagine with the pilot, what I was impressed with is how well prepared, and I wanted to thank Mr. Sosnovic and Ms. Landis and all the teachers and students for doing the pilot, because they've gone through all these things. They've gone through signing people up and knowing that people are going to want to sign up. And we did talk about if people didn't take them home, which is what you're talking about without the technology fee, and having to check those in and out every day. Mrs. Landis brought up, it's not like a textbook 24/7. As we all know, nobody brings home a textbook much anymore, because they're typically, anyway, there's not enough for everybody. So you're going online for the textbook unless you don't have those resources. So I completely saw this on the flip side as, wow, thank goodness. I wouldn't call Methacton behind the 8 ball, but there's a lot of other districts already doing that. And I thought about the ones that weren't, and I'm thinking to myself, that would help me choose as a parent if I was stuck. I'd be like, woohoo! So, I am very excited as an educator, as a parent, and more so because we're so well prepared for this. And you've really thought about it and adjusted things as you saw fit. And I won't take up any more time, but I did want to address that I feel differently, that I would sign up in a heartbeat, and I would be relieved, and it would make the education for children better, I thought, and I didn't feel it was a burden. But again, that's my opinion.
Thank you.
Kim,
question.
you had a question?
I use this thing so infrequently, I forget how to turn it on. So I thought that the presentation was excellent. I felt like it really gave us a good sense of what is incorporated in this program and how much legwork has gone into this so far. My concern, it seems to be a popular one, is about the technology fee. My understanding is that students that are on the free and reduced lunch program, and I'm not sure who would be able to answer this, don't have to pay the pay-to-participate fee for athletics. So I was curious as to why they would have to pay a half fee for this program. When I look at, I do a comparison of athletics versus academics, and it's no-brainer to me which one is the higher priority. So if they can have free and reduced lunch, students can have that fee waived. I would wonder if they couldn't have this fee waived as well.
Is that a question or just a statement?
Well,
Yeah,
I don't know if there is anybody, I'm not sure if
I can
Dr.
answer.
Engstedt would be the one to answer that.
Well, I can
or-
answer the
okay.
questions. That is the case. There are, in hardship cases, and even in cases that aren't necessarily students and families that are under the free and reduced lunch program, but they can appeal to the athletic director, and those fees can be waived under the pay to participate. There aren't many that do that, but it does happen from time to time. And so, again, this is a proposal by the district and led by Mr. Zasnovic and high school principal. But it's important to know that, we believe that this is something that we should do. And these conversations are good for us to help, go back and try to plan to, address some of your concerns related to, at least 2 concerns related to the fees at this point in time. But, I mean, if the direction is that we find another way to offset that cost, then that's what we do. But I just want to say that if as we go through more dialogue, and it seems to be the fee being the holdup here, allow my administration to do some work and come back next week with, a further recommendation, because that shouldn't be the thing that stops us from going forward.
I just would like to bring up 2 points to Mr. Roth and Kim had brought up. There has been thought into the free and reduced lunch fee, and it was not just a number pulled out of thin air. We looked at what other commensurate districts were doing with that fee. In addition to what I neglected to mention was that in most of the districts that have rolled out one-to-one, there's a strong relationship with the foundation that they have, and that foundation helps to offset costs relative to hardships. And I know that I feel very confident that Mr. Constable and the foundation, once we would approach them with this type of initiative, would probably support it as well in the same fashion as other districts did too. So I just wanted to make those 2 pieces that we are thinking through that as well, and some additional supports that we would, if approved moving forward, we would reach out to help with those families. Any other questions?
Brenda, you want to go?
So one of the districts that you mentioned has had this program for a number of years, a bit notoriously, Lower Merion District, where they were monitoring the children at home.
That's right.
Do we have any plans to do any monitoring?
It's not on my project list.
The answer is no.
Yeah.
There's just, the answer is no.
The answer is no, and technically, we don't have the ability to do that with
Thank you.
Chromebooks.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I just want to run the numbers again.
Okay.
If I understand it correctly, without the pay-to-participate fee that you have for this, you are not proposing to spend any more money than you would have spent without implementing this program. And so the participation fee would reduce our costs.
That's
That
correct.
would be money to the district.
That's correct.
Okay, we would be even if we just did it without the fee.
That's correct.
Okay. So you chose Chromebooks.
Yes.
How did you go about choosing that particular product, or did you consider others?
Yeah, we did, and we considered also a number of types of Chromebooks. We looked at what devices were being utilized in education, not only from a statewide and like locally, but now also nationally. Chromebook right now is the #1 selling device in education, surpassed the iPad because of the ability of accessing so many resources online, but in addition to the keyboard. And that was a big hang-up on a lot of the tablets, and having that being implemented in our higher secondary courses where you have to do a lot of, let's say, writing and stuff of that nature. We considered iPads in terms of a tablet. We then considered and costed out what it would be to do a full Windows device, because we're traditionally a Windows-based environment here. Once and that wasn't a siloed decision. That was a decision that we've reached out to a number of teachers, administrators. We all felt that Chromebook was the most appropriate device for methactin. With that said, we then reviewed 3 different Chromebooks: a Samsung, a Dell Chromebook 11, and then the Acer C740, which is the one that we selected. Ultimately, because of the accidental protection plan that is afforded with it, the robustness of the device, it's an industry leader right now with Chromebooks, and the way it's spec'd out, it has greater processing power and some other features that make it more tractable for in comparison to the others. In addition to, it was one of the best costs as well. So we considered all of those things as part of this decision. Welcome.
Scott.
Yeah, thank you. Once again, just like everybody else, I want to commend you on an outstanding presentation. I too have some concerns about the fee, and I had jotted a note that this is, to me, an ideal application for the foundation to be involved with. I do worry a little bit about those students who may or may not have access to internet at home, and do they fall behind? I understand they can plug and play once they get in, but does that in any way hamper them at the end of the day, because many other students will have their devices, be able to take it home and do more because they have access and that immediate response. So, there's just some concern, and I think the Comcast program is outstanding. I just don't know, can some families afford that $10? I don't know if we have a district-wide survey to know how many of our kids do have internet capabilities at home.
We do, and we have that information.
So what percent? Do you have a number?
I could provide that in a follow-up, but we instituted what I mentioned in the presentation, which is the Bright Bites assessment, which we're
I wasn't sure what that was.
Yeah, well, even that's a running joke right now with a lot of people. I don't think even the folks who are at the presentation know what it is. That's just something that we continue to joke about. But anyway, part of that assessment, we gathered those numbers, and we have a percentage that we could share with you that.
Maybe at the board meeting when
Sure.
if this is on the agenda for the board meeting, if you can have that information. I think that's important for the public to hear overall. What is, these things are a commodity, right? You throw them away, basically. I know you're leasing them, but they're a throwaway when they're done. What is the anticipated shelf life of a Chromebook?
3 years, and that's why we're going with a 3-year
It is
lease.
3 years.
If we could squeeze out a 4th year, we would do 4, because then we could look at a different approach, like a 9 to 12 type of model or something like that. But the shelf life of a Chromebook, in essence, is 3 years, and that's with the known hardships that Chromebook is going to face because it's in the hands of a student for 3 years.
Yeah, it can't be 3 years in a kid's hands.
And that's why the ACER program is so attractive, and it's really designed for education and one-to-one programs because it gives you that total replacement in that 3 year, and also those accidental protection claims each year. So it allows the device to to be used at a level that a student would use it and then still be functional because we could repair it at no cost through those programs.
Yep. Yep. And perhaps, and Troy, I don't know, I kind of think we did this at GE, I'm pretty sure we did, but instead of a contract per machine, perhaps there's a way to negotiate a, total pool contract that allows you some flexibility, so if you don't use it on a particular machine, you can use that chit on another machine.
That's a good idea.
I would think about looking at that from a negotiation perspective, because, their policies are going to figure a certain percentage of these things are going to go, but if you're probably better off, instead of negotiating a pooled number that can be applied across the total.
Right.
And that would give you some different values, I think, especially as you look at the outer years.
Yeah, Scott, that's an excellent idea and one that I didn't think of even prior. Now the cogs in my head are going off. So right now we have, one guaranteed claim a year, let's say for a cohort of kids of 400. Let's just say the class size is 400 for 10th graders. What I'm trying to do is negotiate a second claim. Well, that's not to say we can't do a 1.5 or something along those lines and say, okay, of all of these machines, we want to have 600 claims a year versus the 2 that I originally requested.
Yeah, or a carryover from year to year or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can think about packaging that, but I think it's something worth exploring. Idea. They won't like it because they know they're already playing the percentages, but I think as you negotiate, that's probably a smart way to do it. I wasn't quite sure, Troy, why in year 3, if somebody had a device and they wanted to bring their personal device, whatever it is, and it avoids the district having to pay for a device or lease a device, why would we discourage that? And I just, in my mind, I'm sitting there saying, well, some families will have a device per person, some might not, but if they do and it defers or it deletes a cost from a need from our perspective, and the kids are going to go home and do stuff on that device anyhow, why would we discourage that?
Sure. So really it boils down to an equity and equality issue, and we want to create a level playing field for all students in the classroom and not necessarily have a student that has a leg up or an additional advantage. In addition to that, it allows us to do professional development specifically for these type of devices. When we allow for BYOD, there's no guarantee that kid's going to bring in those devices and that type of stuff. So it allows the teacher to better plan their instructional lessons too. There's just a lot of educational benefits of going that route. I understand what you're saying, and with the mixture of BYOD, and again, it's not like we're abandoning BYOD in its entirety. We'd still allow for tablet and mobile devices. It's just that laptop / Chromebook-like device. We'd want to create that parity across all educational settings.
I guess I'm still not there on that particular thing, because if the kid's going to go home and use that device anyhow, why not use it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just my thinking overall. So I'm not quite there with that year 3 policy. I just, because if a kid's used to it, and I understand the parity, I understand that. I'm not so sure if that's as big of an issue. Maybe it is. Maybe it does give them a different advantage. I'm not quite sure. I'm probably not educated enough on it. But I think we need to think about that a little bit more.
Okay.
There is an access issue as well with technology, because students who bring their own devices in typically can access internet without using our network. And when they do that, they bypass all of the filters that we currently have in place, and they're able to get to places that they shouldn't be during the school day.
So they can only access internet if you I guess they could use
Right,
their
on your cell phone,
smartphone
for instance, you don't need,
or as a
you don't need
hotspot.
Wi-Fi to be able to get onto the internet. You can access the internet.
Yeah.
And kids will engage in activity that, once we get to year 3, once they all have the same device and they're all using the same filter, there's a better control over where they are and what they're doing, so that much of the nonsense that happens during a school day can be put to rest, because they're no longer actively using those devices that are engaging in that way.
But you have that issue now, right?
Very much, which is why I'm really looking forward to year 3, when that will not necessarily be an issue. It takes a lot of time in the day for us to be dealing with, he said this, and she texted that, and last night this, and last night that.
You don't think that's going to stop because they all
Well,
have
last night is
smartphones,
one
right?
thing, but during the school day is another matter in time.
They all have their phones, and their phones are going to become the same as just about any other device in 3 years. So, I mean, it's just something I think to think about. And then, Dr. Zerbe, the last thing's for you. Does this cause this, the collaboration after normal school hours, does this cause us any issues with the collective bargaining agreement with the teachers? Are we extending the school day? Are we doing anything that could cause us issues for claims that we may not necessarily have now? And I know teachers work at home now as it is, so and they grade tests and they do things like that, but if you're extending the device and maybe having the expectation of extended collaboration, what does that do to us through the collective bargaining agreement, if anything?
While certainly your point raises the potential for us to have some issues if specifically directed by administration for teachers to do certain activities. At this point, I'm aware that we've been utilizing the pilot program as a means to do some experimenting, what works best for our teachers as well as what works best for our students. I think that there is going to be a path that we cover when we get there. I think, as Troy talked about the professional development model, it also talks about, while we're going to phase in active devices over 3 years, you're going to see the program as it's utilized and the resource as it's utilized differently by the 3rd year, by the 4th year, by the 5th year than you would in the 1st year.
Agreed.
And so we believe with the professional development, we'll grow, and we're likely going to have those conversations with our instructional staff to make sure that we set appropriate office hours for teachers so that their contact time with students doesn't go beyond their contractual obligation.
Yeah, I think we have to think of, especially with a contract that will be up next year,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely,
Because
absolutely.
we'll be in the middle of a 3-year contract, and we'll be at this, nexus where you're, immersed. So it's just something I think that we have to make sure we consider as we discuss, and there might have to be formal policy developed around that so it avoids claims. So it's just something I think as we roll down this path, and I think we've got to immerse our kids in technology. That's the world that they're in now, and it's going to only become more so. But I just think we've got to think of these crossroads and how they intersect and what the issues might be. That's it.
I had one quick question.
Can we move on to Paul?
Oh, sorry, yes, you're right.
Real quick, first question on the Chromebooks with the teachers again. Are the teachers getting the Chromebooks currently, or they're using their own device also?
Okay, so just for clarity, every teacher has a Chromebook because all it is the Chrome browser. So all of their laptops have Chrome installed on it. They are issued Dell Windows-based laptops. No, we are not looking to roll out Chromebooks to them next year.
Okay. Second question related to that. The current pilot program where we had 100% participation,
yes,
there was no fee involved associated with that, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the last question is the skin in the game related to, I understand the points around the fee, but what were other districts was there skin in the game for dropping it out of an airplane and dropping it into the ocean and so forth? Is that why some districts have installed a fee in the process?
That terminology is what was in the conversations that we had with some of these districts, and that's why they introduced the technology fee, so families would have skin in the game and then treat the device more appropriately than if it was just given to them through the district. With that said, like I mentioned, if they extend beyond what our protection plan affords us, then they would have to incur those damage and costs. And that it typically is the model that I shared on that one slide. There's a range of participation fee for one-to-ones, but in some of these other districts were not as savvy to negotiate a good protection plan, so they got to provide more costs relative to replacement and repair. The one that we have gives us the ability not to go after a family for an accident for those 3 claims and the rest of it. So it really is dependent on the contract that district, that those other districts negotiated and what they were willing to get. I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Quick follow-up? Yeah, real quick. As I understand it, just quickly looking around, so the Chromebooks will not support Microsoft Office programs?
We leverage and we've been supporting Google Drive and Gap, which is Google Apps for Education, which has that whole productivity suite. With that said, we also, Office 365 is free for everyone in the world. So you could sign up for an Office 365 account and have access to some of those features of Word, the online version of Word and PowerPoint and stuff like that, if through the Chromebook, if that was your particular flavor of productivity tool. So
I think what I'm getting at is I think those who want to work on their own device and not use the Chromebook at home, because they're going to be using this they were going to use Google Drive anyway and use the Google apps to do their work, correct? So they really wouldn't need those Microsoft Office programs like PowerPoint or Excel or any of that stuff, right?
No.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, just to finish up, we had talked about rolling it out for 7 through 12.
Right.
Is there any more of a concern for 7th and 8th grade versus the high school? I mean, we piloted it there. Have the other school districts who have done this, was it just the high school, or did they?
No, as I mentioned, there are a number of districts that extended it down to even grade 2. Now, let me clarify, though, the ones that are in elementary, they typically didn't take them home with them. They started to afford students to take them home at a middle school age because they felt that the maturity level of the student was such that they can responsibly manage the device and bring it in, make sure that it's charged. You're starting to get students prepared for that, to take on more personal responsibility of their own learning. The concern, they're younger, more immature than our high schoolers. What we've seen out in other districts, that there are greater damage claims and accidents that happen at that rate, but nothing insurmountable. So if you would look at claims relative to programs, the younger you go, the more claims you're going to have, and that's just in any district, and that's just because of the maturity of the child.
Okay, thank you. And that kind of leads into kind of what Scott was saying too, that I think is very important, especially if you are going to roll it out to 7th and 8th grade, that you do look at that pool of accident protection versus with the student. I mean, you can certainly have a whole separate policy in-house that if it's the kid's second time or the third time that he would be responsible for it. But I think in terms of negotiations, I think it's important to go with the pool aspect versus the student.
No, I really appreciated that suggestion, and that will be my strategy moving forward.
Okay. And just finally, I would recommend the elimination completely of the free and reduced for those students. Again, going along with sports, if they didn't have to do it necessarily for hardship cases, I would say just take it completely off the table. That's just my take. Thank you.
Okay, so I appreciate all the comments. Mr. Sosnovic and Principal Landis did an excellent job in answering your questions and with the presentation. We'd like to bring a resolution forward to the meeting next week. First of all, there were two resolutions. One was associated with getting approval from the board to implement the one-to-one program with the projected lease cost as delineated. The second resolution was the technology fee. And I guess what I need is some direction from the board as to shall we, first of all, move forward with a resolution for the one-to-one program?
I would think from what we've heard from pretty much all the board members this evening that I think everyone's pretty much on board with the one-to-one program as a whole. Please feel free to chime in.
Okay. And then...
Yeah, I'm in favor, but I guess what's the timing issue, and should we get some of the answers to some of the questions prior to moving forward? So it won't probably sway, but I think I'd like to understand before we basically approve it and move it to the public. I'd like to get some answers on a couple of these questions. Now, if there's a timing issue that we've got to place in order, this sounds like these are pretty much a commodity, they're pretty readily available, so does it make sense to come back with some of these questions that were raised and then, move forward? I mean, tentatively I'm okay, but I still would like some of these answers.
Well, your point well taken. I think what I'd like to do is meet with our team following the meeting here this evening, review the questions that were asked and determine whether or not we feel confident to provide the answers that you're seeking. And if so, we'll bring them forward at the meeting next week with a resolution. And then the next question is, are you interested in entertaining a resolution related to a technology fee? With or without different wording. Basically, the assumption is, shall we bring forward a technology fee resolution?
I'll say no. I have no interest in that.
My concern with that is, since we have a budget presentation as well, I believe we were trying to offset some costs, and I understand everybody's concern about the technology fee. And bringing up the free and reduced lunch students and other families that might find this difficult. But I'm just so concerned that we've already made budget cuts, and I would hate to have to not do this. And I'm comfortable with the fee, but I may be in the minority. That's all.
You're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Well, let me just clarify something that may be helpful for everybody. I think Ms. Hackett made a statement earlier to define what the difference is between the fee and no fee. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, she asked the question, without the fee, are we basically still able to afford the implementation of this program within the budget structure of $1 million that's been budgeted? And I think Mr. Sosnovic answered the question to the affirmative.
That's correct.
So what I'm suggesting is, while the administration thinks that we believe it's important to assess the fee, we certainly also understand your concerns, but I want to make sure that I'm bringing forward the resolutions that are appropriate for your consideration. So if there's no interest at all in a fee at this moment in time, then I'd prefer not to bring that forward and just bring the resolution for the Chromebook one-to-one program with the responses to questions.
If we could get more information on the other districts that have had this fee and how it has impacted the number of claims that they've seen. To Paul's point that, if parents are putting out some money, are the devices being treated a little bit better versus schools that don't have a fee? Are they seeing more claims because of carelessness? If we can find any more information about that, I think that would be helpful in making a decision.
Okay.
So with that said, I think that's a good request of information. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring forth both resolutions and the information, if we're prepared to provide the information. If we're not prepared, we will forego asking you to vote on the matter. Any other final questions?
From my thought of view, I mean, I'd rather forego the fee. I think as a district, we're either going to be in this game, and that's the trend that we need to be in to provide the right educational experience for our students, or we're not. And I think the athletic comparison's a little different, because this, we have to go buy a device for athletics and band and whatnot, which the activity fee covers. You know, those teams exist, those coaches exist. One or two more people here or there probably don't make a difference in the overall cost, because those programs are funded overall, I think. I know there's some offsets there, but it's not even close to the offset on the program. But I think as a district, we're either going to adapt policies that we're in this game and we're promoting it to the highest level, or we're not, which means we should find budget room to do this program as a self-sustained program.
And that's fine, and I think I've heard enough this evening to suggest that, you know, this probably needs to go to a vote. And with all fairness to everyone, I think I'll bring both resolutions forward. Certainly, you know, when it gets to the table for the vote, someone can make a motion to change the resolution, to remove something or not to remove something. That's fine, but I do appreciate your dialogue here this evening on this matter, and thank you, Mr. Sosnovic and Ms. Landis. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item for discussion is the update on the budget. I ask the board to take their seats in the audience again, please. And this will be the last presentation for this evening. While you're taking your seats, I just want people to know that we will have a strategic planning presentation at the April 27th meeting.
Thanks. As soon as I get back there, I'll turn it on. Okay.
So while we're waiting to start, I just want to make the board aware that we had our last presentation was this past week in front of the Finance Committee. We did not post this presentation up in advance of this because we were working on some items. So while much of the presentation here is representative from the Finance Committee meeting of just less than a week ago, there are some additions and some changes based on some comments from the board, as well as some new information that was brought forward in recent days. So, Mr. Whiteleather?
Thank you. I know we're pushing 2 hours here at the meeting, so I'll try to be relatively quick, but yet cover the important topics as they pertain to the budget update presented for your review this evening. Most important thing that we just need to touch base on is the timeline as it pertains to the key actions required by the board. May 24th would be where we would be requesting the board's adoption of the proposed final budget. This creates our need to advertise the budget, leading to our final adoption slated for June 28th. There's specific timelines that are involved as it relates to the time differential between May 24th and June 28th. I just bring that to your attention as a matter of course, as we're quickly approaching these key dates between proposed final and final adoption. This is a slide that you're familiar with in the prior meeting that was presented back on March 15th. We showed 3 different scenarios. The far left represents scenario where we would implement the Act 1 increase as well as the PSERS exception, and the generated budgetary short listed there at the bottom of $188,000. Scenario B would be where we would have excluded the PSERS exception of tax value and the associated budgetary short. And then finally, scenario C would be where there would be no tax increase at all and the associated budgetary short of $2.67 million. As it pertains to this evening, we have basically our mandatory items. This is a continuation of numerous discussions, presentations that we've had over the last few months. The far left column represents our current 15-16 budget as it relates to each one of the categories, as well as what you approved in January during our preliminary budget, and then where things stand here for this evening. The important thing we wanted to note is just how these mandatory items represent, obviously, the vast majority of our overall operational budget that is presented to you this evening, as well as in current years, as well as prior years. What we've done here is, I'll just take one step back. Each one of these categories here is in summary format. The following slides break down in detail each one of these categories to the total dollar amounts that are reflected here in the column labeled for April 19th. So as it pertains to the salaries, we obviously have all of our various categories from teachers, our MESPA support staff, as well as our Teamsters or custodians, grounds crew, confidentials, administration. You can see the number of positions contained within each classification and then the dollar amounts associated with their salaries here in this particular column. We also have our supplemental positions that are also reflected in terms of number of positions that are allocated to each, as well as the dollar value. Just one point of note, the unpaid leaves represents professional leaves that occur throughout the year. Various reasons why we would have staff members on unpaid leave, but there is a value to that that we have generated over historical data collection, and just as a point of reference that you would see that negative number and have a question with that, I just wanted to point that out. PSERS retirement, obviously this is a number we've spoken about at length in prior presentations because it has become a very large part of our budget. Again, similar format breakdown, position classifications, as well as the value of the PSERS contribution. Just realize that the number down here at the bottom, $13.1 million, represents our expenditure side of the budget. It does not reflect the income coming in from the state, which as currently stands until it's otherwise changed at 50%. So 50% of this dollar amount would be reimbursed from the Commonwealth. Our medical, dental, vision, prescription, as well as workers' comp, again, very similar format. You can see each one of the classifications, the dollar amounts associated with each, and then the total for our medical benefits. And we have a provision that was applicable on prior contracts for retiree medical care. That will be falling off here in the next 2 years. But again, there is still a value to that as the district contractually obligated through prior agreements with primarily our professional staff for extended district-paid retiree health care. And then finally, our workers' compensation number, so that you can see the total value of everything here is $10.6 million. Under our debt category, broken it down into the various components, our general obligation debt, this is all the debt that the district has incurred over the years that we're still making payments on for renovations, new constructions throughout the district over the course of the last number of years. We have the lease value that is applicable to the technology component that Mr. Snusnovic was talking about earlier this evening. And then finally, our ESCO project, that is the performance contracting project where we installed lighting retrofits and other energy-saving components here at the high school, as well as Skyview and Arcola. So you can see our total debt service of $10.7 million. Our transportation budget, what we're doing here at following from left to right is our yearly obligation of transportation costs applicable to not only primarily First Student, but also other contractors, including the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit for Specialized Transportation, as well as Best of Times Limo that we would have for specialized transportation needs. We have the medical component. These are grandfathered employees of the Methacton School District that transitioned over to First Student. We agreed to carry their medical insurance at 80%. The employee is responsible for the 20% portion, the value associated with that. And then the further breakdown of summer transportation, sports trips, and then finally the total. Fuel is obviously a large component, but again, this is a number we've spoken about in the past, a significant decrease over the prior year. So as you can see, our total value of our transportation line item budget, this does not obviously include salaries, this is just the operational side of $6.3 million. Special education, obviously a very complex and involved part of our budget. What we did here is to break it down into the major components. Our professional services, anytime we would go out to Montgomery County Intermediate Unit as one item that we would have services provided from them, that would fall under the professional services category. Obviously, we have our minor categories, repairs and maintenance, tuition and travel. Tuition is any placements that we would have for students at another institution. The value of that placement is associated with that line item. And then, as you can see, the supplies and equipment are pretty self-explanatory. And claims and judgments are any settlements that we would make as a result of a due process claim that we would ultimately settle and have a value associated with that in terms of a payment. So you can see the total value of $4.9 million for that area of the budget. Employer FICA, again, similar format, broken down by all the various categories that we have, as well as the value associated with that. Again, as it currently stands, employer FICA is subsidized by the Commonwealth at 50%. So again, this number represents our expenditure side. It does not represent the reimbursement we receive from the Commonwealth. The facility side of the budget, broken down in a similar format to what we had for pupil services. You can see our various categories. Obviously, utilities and repairs represent the largest portion of our budget, which includes electricity, natural gas, water, sewer throughout all of our buildings. Our second largest areas are supplies across each of the buildings, anything ranging from toilet paper to soap, paper towels, etc., across the organization, as well as supplies that would be used in repairs and or maintenance of our facilities throughout the year. Total value of $2.9 million. North Montco, we have our annual tuition payment that's applicable here. And the roof replacement, there was a question asked at the Finance Committee meeting whether that was a 15-16 or a 16-17 expense. The roof replacement is slated to begin on June 16th. In discussion with North Montco, this bill would be coming out for us on a 16-17 basis, which is the reason why it is still included in the value for this particular line item of the budget. Charter schools, this is an item for us that obviously represents a significant cost for us, and it is really one that is very difficult, if not impossible, to gauge accurately. However, using trend and trying to project out what we believe to be as close to an accurate number as possible, we've put down what we believe to be our projected numbers for the 16-17 year, as well as the value associated with that cost. The last three categories, as they pertain to the breakdown of that first page summary that I first reviewed, the employee severance line item represents any employee severance that was agreed to in the past. So over the last several years, we've had early retirement incentives that have been offered both to professional staff as well as early retirement incentives that have been offered to all of our staff under a 5-year program that are still payments are applicable to there. So anything we would offer moving forward under the RIP offered this year would be added to this number. Unemployment historical number that we trended forward. And then lastly, our staff tuition dollar amount that we have reflected for next year. Teachers represents contractual obligation, and administration represents the trend that we're seeing, as well as communicating with our administrators to determine how many we're going out to courses and what that value would be, so we could more accurately budget for that impact for next year. The next slide I'll be speaking about is what have we done in prior years to reflect expenditure reductions to our budget. Over the course of the last few years, we've obviously represented in multiple areas throughout our budget to reduce costs overall in our operations. Obviously, some of the bigger items are our participation in the health consortium. That's represented about $1.4 million to us, as well as looking at our professional staff and other staffing positions. You can see in 10-11, we had 445 professional staff positions. We're at 422 presently. We've also eliminated other positions throughout the district over the last few years, again, as a means to look at our operations more streamlined and addressing, obviously, the sustainability of our operations over the long term. What are budget reductions and revenue increases that we've seen here for the 16-17 budget? Many of these you're very familiar with, the debt refunding that we recently completed to achieve the $425,000 savings. We also reduced our STS, or our subs, which are our day-to-day subs as well as our long-term subs. We've reduced that number from over $1.7 million to 1.5, again using historical trend numbers to generate what we believe to be a more accurate portrayal of this. The reason why we're adjusting that number is when we negotiated our current teacher's contract, we then basically outsourced all of our substitute needs, day-to-day and long-term. So in our initial projections of that line item, we have seen a reduction from what our original targeted number reflected to what we are seeing here presently. So that reflects that reduction amount. The CPO position, which has been spoken about in the past, removal of that position from the budget. The transportation subsidy, this was a number that was just updated to us yesterday evening. The Commonwealth generates our transportation subsidy based on the prior year's transportation. So they will use 14-15 information to generate the subsidy we will receive in 15-16. So the updated information from the Commonwealth has projected for us to realize a $223,000 increase over what we had budgeted in the preliminary budget. So that was a good gain for us. We reduced our staff tuition, and this was primarily driven by our administrative staff. We, as I communicated prior, we emailed all of our staff, all of our administrative staff, and asked them who's going, what courses you're taking, what's the value of that, and we were able to adjust that number down to the tune of $100,000. Our athletic field escrow, we spoke about our $117,000 line item that we allocated for the sustainability model, replacing the fields and other various capital needs for the project we recently completed. Based on the budgetary constraints, we were looking at reducing that number by $50,000, or reducing it by $67,000 to a $50,000 net number. And then finally, our building and department budget reductions, which is an ongoing process for us, but as we stand, we're at $60,000. So total reductions at $1.38 million as it currently stands. So in summary form, here's our total expenditures of $1.5 million, our revenues of $1.2 million, So our short right now, with no tax increase, is $3.3 million. If we allocate both the index tax increase as well as the PSERS exception increase, it drops our short down to $835,000. That number is brought over here. We now reduce the early retirement incentive that we are offering for this year. That will be closing May 1st. The value of that minus our short brings us to $603,000. This area down here represents what the value of the tax increase would be for each one of the two components, both Act 1 and the PSERS exception, and then total percentage increase as well as total value to the average homeowner. The average home is assessed at $180,776. Additional budget considerations to address the shortfall. The number here represents from the prior slide recommendations that administration is offering for your review this evening is our staffing terminations and resignations, elimination of the school resource officer program at the end of the current contract in January of 2017, advertisements that would be offered to outside vendors throughout our district facilities at the value of $25,000, and then restoration of our allocation towards our capital fund towards our athletic project at the value of $50,000. So again, following the format, we're at $272,000 short with those values added in that the administration is recommending for your consideration. And then potential additional items, we can allocate some additional value to reductions at our elementary, elementary including Skyview, Arcola and high school budgets to the tune of $15,000. We can also look at pay-to-play, increasing the value associated with students who participate in that program. Currently, students at middle school at Arcola pay $50. The high school will pay $75. And then finally, our use of facilities. At our most recent property committee meeting, we spoke about evaluating that current plan as well as the values and way we are going to be allocating our facilities in the future. While we feel the number is conservative, we do feel that there is going to be additional value there based upon how we're looking to utilize our facilities for outside groups in the future. So again, same format. Subtracting off those values, we're dropping down to the $221,000. And then finally, our bus route review. And speaking with our consultant as well as various individuals throughout the organization to get a better handle on what exactly we'd be looking at. We've demonstrated this number to you in the past of $300,000. However, we're not seeing that information being finalized until June. There's also a caution that why I asterisk this, depending on the finalization of the bus route review, actual savings may vary from the estimate. The reason I say that is because whatever recommendations that may come to administration and ultimately you as board may not be something that you ultimately want to implement to the extent that the recommendation is made. So depending upon what is brought to the table and then what ultimately is enacted, this number could certainly change. So that's the reason why we wanted to asterisk that for your review here this evening. So based upon that, the district right now, all these factors included, would be at a positive number of $78,000. And that concludes my presentation, and we can go back to our seats and ask questions.
Open it up to the board for some questions.
I'm going to ask the question I asked in an email at like 4 a.m., so I didn't expect an answer at 4 a.m. But I would like to know the exact positions of the 23 that were reduced from 2010 till present. And I know some of those were retirements that did not get replaced, but I want to know every single one of those 23 positions, please. And then the only other, I know everyone's going to have a lot of questions, and I'll leave it to the finance experts. My other question is when it says staffing, terminations, resignations, I want to know what exactly that means. I'm assuming one of them means you're saving a little bit on a principal because one retired, I'm not sure.
No, those are staff positions that aren't going to be replaced as a result of a staff resignation or a termination. So that means it's not a retirement, it's not part of the early retirement incentive. It means that they resigned for solely as a resignation, or they're being terminated.
So I would like more information on that, please, or if I'm allowed.
Yeah, we won't have that information in a public session.
Maybe I miss. Okay, so you're saying we don't need this staff? I'm confused. I'm sorry. I'm tired.
That is correct. The staff that are part of that category under resignation and terminations, those positions that are held by those people will not be filled.
And they're teaching positions?
They're positions, they're employees of the district.
I have a quick question regarding the SRO program. You said...
Well, before you go, I just want to make sure that you understand I'm not trying to be evasive. I think there's matters that I can't speak about, but we can certainly, if it's the interest of the board to have more detail around what is specifically behind that, we can do that in an executive session, because it will specifically identify individual employees, which would not be appropriate to do in a public setting.
I understand that. I just didn't realize that. Is that a budget cut? Like, I guess maybe I missed some information somewhere, so that's my fault. Is that a budget cut, or was that due to something else?
No, it just happens to be that those positions in that category are not going to be replaced based on the evaluation of the administration and the needs for positions within the district as a result of this proposal.
Okay, SRO program. So right now, we're down to one SRO officer, is that correct?
We received, we have a second SRO in training. They haven't been court approved yet. So under the agreement with the township, they are obligated to provide us with 2 SROs. There was one based on the township's determination to remove and to replace with another employee. That employee has been for the last week shadowing the SRO from Arcola, and we are waiting the paperwork that would authorize them to be an SRO in the high school, independent of the other employee.
Because you have under recommended items in the budget short $99,000 for the elimination of the SRO program in January. Is that one officer, 2 officers, both? It can't be both because our program costs way more than that.
So let me explain that, and if I may, I think we've delineated the SRO program in totality, the 2 officers, to be approximately about $299,000 in the budget, and therefore, while there were some requests by the board for me to seek funding from from both townships, I want the board to know that I'm still in the process of doing that. I haven't received specific no's, and I haven't received specific yeses, but it's a matter of conversation. But I can tell you that it will be challenging to get that. It's my opinion that it will be challenging to get funding from both townships to support the SRO program. Essentially, with that said, I need to take a look at that program, and that's exactly what I did. I said that, well, if without the funding, it becomes a fiscal challenge for us to meet that obligation on an annual basis. And then, as we are right now, we're tied into a contract with a third-party provider. So the township, in my opinion, has done a tremendously good job with providing the service that they did. There's no question in my mind of the service that the township has provided. The problem is, can we sustain this level of service indefinitely? And when looking at that and looking at the fact that, we already do have a police force in Lower Providence that can typically respond to instances in all of our schools except for 2 within 3 to 5 minutes of a call, which is a great response time. We can't be guaranteed that type of response time in the other 2 Worcester schools, and therefore what this $99,000 reduction shows is that we would continue with our obligation under the contract with Lower Providence Township. Again, with your approval, this is just my recommendation. For the extent of this agreement, we would give them notice here shortly that we would no longer renew the agreement, and that agreement ends sometime about January of 2017. And at that point, because we have a budget of about $299,000, we estimate that on a monthly basis from July 1 through approximately January, we would spend in the neighborhood about $160,000, $170,000, and therefore the remaining residual of the difference between that amount and the $99,000 would pay for the subcontracted service with an outside provider or an employee that we would hire in the typical fashion that other districts like Springford, Souderton, many districts in the Commonwealth are going to their own managed police force that has arresting powers and has certain authorities granted to them under the courts to act on behalf of as law enforcement officers. In the instance we still need them to do that. I do believe that having that resource in our high school as well as in other aspects of our district is important, so I'm not suggesting that we abandon the concept. I am suggesting that we look at a new way of addressing the concern. And this is not putting in what's called for lack of a better term, a rent-a-cop that you might see at a mall or someone of that nature without much authority or without much credibility. We need to make sure that, the individuals in these positions will be those that can have arresting powers and have authority to conduct business as we would expect them to and assist our administration in dealing with matters of significant consequence. So really the $99,000 represents what we know we could save in the difference between what we'll pay under the current obligation and what we would pay for the remaining of the school year for a subcontracted and or employed person to fulfill that role at the high school. So going forward, it is currently a recommendation for next year is how that is budgeted. We may need to consider, and I'd like to include some board members as well as some of our administrators and teachers on how to really flush that out long term, because while I don't expect the cost to be $300,000 or $299,000, I do think that we could reduce our costs significantly and provide a reasonably similar service as we do now. But I will clarify, it won't be the same. I mean, there's a big difference. Our communication with Lower Providence has been tremendous. They've been very supportive, and I don't think that their support is going to go away. It's just that we won't have this type of the relationship continuing. So that's where I'm at with that. That's open for discussion, and it's part of our recommendation to to meet our needs as well as to address the immediate and the long-term budget concerns, because $300,000 doesn't go away next year or the following year. I mean, it's something that we need to address, and I think that's what we're putting out in front of you.
And my last question is on one of the first pages, you have Scenario A, Act 1 plus Peasers. That leads down to a budget shortfall of $188,000. That was presented back in March 15th. But now I'm seeing that the budget shortfall is $603,000. Budget considerations to address shortfall, $603,000. Then you have your recommendations, of which is the SROs in there and everything, and eliminating our COLA, or increasing pay to play and all that stuff. So I guess I'm just trying to follow the outline here and how this is running, because I don't.
Yeah, I can understand your
understand it.
I understand your confusion. The slide that you're referring to in the options, that was given to you back in March.
Correct.
And it really is, while you can refer back to that, we're really trying to just set a framework for where we were in the process, and nothing else. Because the way those things were calculated back in March aren't the same sequence of the calculation that's in front of you with the current 70. It's just not the same calculation.
I know. It
Because
just
we
seems that
we pulled out the bus and
And the debt restructuring.
Right. So what I'd like to see is a document that gives us an accurate projection of the budget situation that we stand today, okay? I understand this is here, but I'm still looking at stuff from March that is so long, it's changed, right? And I've seen that. I've seen that stuff before. I don't need to see it anymore.
Okay.
What I want to see is, where we are, if you want to have two columns of where we were in March and where we are now, so you have the projected and the actuals, then that makes it a lot easier to see. Now, my other thing is here we are, 10 o'clock at night. We haven't even gone through the agenda yet. And I hate sounding like a grandfather, and John, you understand, we've been through a lot of these budgets together. In the past, we've had budget-based board meetings. In other words, we've had a meeting, special board meeting, to go over this stuff, because this is so involved, and as we get closer and as we get down to the nitty-gritty, it needs to be covered. Yes, you can do that in Finance Committee, but then you need to have a Finance Committee meeting of the whole, okay? So that I don't have to go through this and go through all these questions, and I can understand what's going on. Now, if that is the case, then we need to, let's get this scheduled in the calendar, because we cannot keep doing stuff like this. I don't think clearly at 10 o'clock at night when I get up at 4:30 in the morning, okay? And I've said this before, we had on the agenda 3 presentation items, 2 of which were big ones. And that's, fine for a work session, but, we are running out of time. And in years past, we've had special budget presentations to the public where we'd go over the budget and go over things like that. Has that been considered at all for the next month or so?
I mean, I'm open to whatever direction the board wants to go in terms of multiple meetings and so forth. I can discuss that with the board president, and we can, respond back to the board as whether or not that seems like an appropriate thing to do. I'm not saying it's not. I don't know what everyone's opinion is, and I think that.
Well, I think this,
with respect to time,
I
can have that discussion with the board president. He can communicate that request to you, and then he can communicate to me whether or not we're going to hold a meeting, and we'll hold the meeting.
Because right now I'm seeing still a $600,000 budget shortfall. Okay, then you add in all these things to get down to that, of which the bus route, we don't even really know how much it's going to be, because like you said, we may not like the solutions he's presenting. So,
right, we're honestly, we're really trying to keep everyone apprised of what the status is, and we went through this, so we spent a significant amount of time with the Finance Committee. I think our last meeting ended at maybe 11 o'clock, which was earlier than the last one before that, so it's good, we're on the right track. But, these are difficult things, and we're trying to be as clear and thorough as possible. But if we need to hold another meeting, I'll take that information back.
And I think what I'm getting at is you need to, the Finance Committee does its work and everything like that, but when it comes to, as we get closer to those deadlines and those dates, I think you need to have a meeting solely dedicated to the budget so we can hash some of these things out. Okay, that's just my opinion. There are 8 others.
And just to chime in there, as chair of the Finance Committee, part of the idea was to try and get some of this information to the board as a whole during these work sessions. We've now touched on the budget during almost every single one, with the idea of being, you don't need a data download at just one thing and say, here's the budget when we're close to it. What we've done is we've shown you an updated list of, the mandatory sheet that we've seen going on. And that number in that right column, which is now dated 4/19, that's the number that keeps changing each time that we put this forward to you. The numbers in each of those categories have shifted and gone over, and Stuart has highlighted each time what has been causing any of the significant increases or decreases with that. So if you follow through, each of these slides basically is trying to tie back to each individual line item. I mean, we are certainly open to any questions you may have regarding this, but this information is out there for you to see. I'm not quite sure how much more you would want to see or what you're not seeing.
First of all, you're missing 2 board members tonight. Number 2,
Well, whose fault is that?
you know what, Michael, I'm done. Forget it.
Yeah, gentlemen, if we could.
Because Herb, I know we appreciate your input, but Chris is out of town, and I believe Jim, I don't want to speak for him, but he thought there was a finance committee meeting tonight, not a work session. I heard, but I don't know if that's true. He has also chosen not to be part of any committee, so how is that our fault?
Andrea, I am not talking about other board members. I'm talking about a budget that now we still have $600,000 to fill.
I realize that, but you just said 2 people aren't here.
Right, so how are we going to get their input?
Okay.
Next month?
Listen, members of the board, I presented this budget for your information, okay? We don't have to have a major dialogue about it. It's going to be adjusted multiple times, even in the weeks coming to the next, we may find other adjustments. We may be closer to things. So if it's appropriate to have a discussion tonight, we can. If it's not, we can ask the board president if, for example, we want to hold a special meeting. You guys can determine if we do want to do that, and we can go ahead and do it. If not, we're going to be in front of the finance committee, and we're going to be back here in a work session in another month, and we can do whatever we need to do to make sure that we have the proper time to have the discussion. But I think it's my job to make sure that we're educating all members of the board, whether they're present or not. They're going to see this presentation, they're going to see the numbers, and they're going to know where we're at. So any other questions on the presentation that we provided here today?
I have one other one. Reduction to elementary Arcola high school budgets. Can we give me like one example of what that means? Like, for example, at my school, 2 autistic support teachers really need to go to a conference. Due to budget cuts, they're not going. I think that's a problem. So I would like to know, I mean, it's $15,000, but it might be something really important, and I have trouble saying yes or no, not knowing what those details are, to a degree.
Yeah, it's real simple. But they're not tied to a specific item. We went ahead and you got to understand, we were trying to find ways to manage the budget. I took 5 elementary schools, $1,000 off their supply budget. I took $2,500 off of Skyview, $2,500 off of Arcola, and $5,000 off of the high school. I think that adds up to 15, if I did my math correctly. And that's what we did. It's that simple. So it's up to the building principal to determine with the remaining money how they will allocate that within the structure and needs within the building. So that may be, as you notice on here, it's not one of our recommendations, but it is an option. And the recommendations are the things that I think we want you to know that these are things we ought to do, that we're saying that we ought to do. These are things that we can choose to do. And from below that. So, you can certainly vote on that, and we can have that discussion in more detail. But that's where we're at. Other questions?
I have a couple. I think this came up in the finance meeting. I would like to understand a little bit about the $500,000 plus in custodial overtime. I'm not sure what the total pay is for the custodial pool. I guess it's probably somewhere in here. But, I think we need to, whether we maybe change shift time starting and stopping, I don't know what our ability to do that is under the contract. I know people don't like to hear the outsourcing world, but, when they do custodial outsourcing, oftentimes the blended of the overtime is absorbed because you do different shift start and stop times. I'm not saying that's an issue. I know some of it comes with snow removal, but I do think that, $550,000 in overtime seems a little heavy, and perhaps we can look at that and make a challenge to Mark to reduce that across the board. So I don't think we need to answer it now, Stuart, but I do think that's something that perhaps needs some additional work from my perspective. I thought, Stuart, on the roof replacement, I thought the Finance Committee question was not which year it was in the budget. I do think we talked about that, but I thought that we talked about is the funding coming out of the reserve, and therefore not in either the 15-16 or 16-17 budget.
Yeah, I believe Ms. Hackett brought that up in the Finance Committee, and she's right. I mean, that's what we decided, that's what we recommended when we passed the resolution to fund the roof replacement. But we kept it in the budget because if we're able to afford it within the budget, it's our recommendation that we pay for it out of budgeted funds and not out of the fund balance. So we have the ability at some point in the budgetary process, if need be, to pull it out and just make it a fund balance item. But it's our recommendation at this time, if we can, we put it in a budgetary item.
Do we have the ability, Dave, to pay it this year if we have a balance left in the budget? I mean, can we get a bill from North Monco that would hit prior to June 30th so that we could either accrue it or pay it?
No, I think Mr. Whiteleather alluded to the point in his presentation that after checking with North Monco, the roof will not be completed until after July 1 of 2016.
I understand that it's not going to be completed by then. That doesn't mean they can't bill us for our portion in advance, potentially. I think it's worth exploring. I mean, we're going to pay it in one of three ways, and if we have surplus this year, is that a better way to use the surplus? Just a question across the board. And my guess is they would gladly take the money early, but I don't know. And then I wanted to make sure of two other things very quickly, because I know we're running out of time. The second debt refinancing that we talked about is not in here now, right? So that's $575,000 if we wanted to think about doing that and trying to go after just the index number.
That is an option.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, so that's something that's still available. And how much in this budget is going into the general reserve? Is it 300,000?
200.
200 for next year? I thought it was 300 next year.
We have 300 allocated for the capital reserve transfer, but 200,000 is for budgetary reserve for unanticipated expenditures.
Okay.
So there's two separate line items.
Okay, so I guess I wasn't,
But
I didn't know the second one. So give me the 200K one is what?
200,000 is budgetary reserve.
And what would that be used for typically? Rainy day? I mean, something that comes up?
An unexpected expenditure that would arise that we would need to have that money to pay for.
Okay, and then what was the second one again? It was 300K?
300,000 is for the general fund transfer to our capital reserve.
Okay.
And that's that progressively building one?
Yeah, okay.
And there's one other aspect to that. We talked about the athletic field project. That's 117,000. So that's an addition to the 300.
Well, only...
No, it's only 67,000.
It's a budgeted
it's
item.
117, but we had taken in an earlier iteration 50 out of it.
Well,
and then you
as
add
you
it
can...
back here.
Well, right, we added it back in. I mean,
Yeah.
the good news today was the resulting subsidy for transportation, and therefore, when we looked at this whole in totality, why wouldn't we put that back in? And so it's...
I'm just
there's
trying to
options.
collect piles of money in my mind. Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Any other questions?
I just like to make a comment that I appreciate all the work that's been done on this. You've attacked many, many areas, and you have come up with a lot of good solutions, and I appreciate all the work that's been done on it. I have one area that I haven't seen any suggested changes on that I think you might consider, and that is consultants and attorney fees as a possibility that perhaps that could be cut down a bit.
Just so you know, we did.
You looked at them, but
not
you didn't-
attorney fees, but consultants, we did.
You looked at it, okay, and you expect, even though we
What
have...
was, Mr. Whiteheather, what was the number that we reduced? Because most of those are sitting in my budget. It was, it was
right around about $40,000 to $50,000 that we reduced for the various consulting out of the superintendent's budget.
yeah.
Okay. But I still struggle with the fact that we look like we're aiming towards 2.4 plus PSERs. And I think that's a challenge for us in this district from a number of perspectives. And I'm not sure that it is something that will ultimately redound to our benefit. One of the issues we have is high taxes in certain areas, and I do know that there's been a tremendous impact in the ability of people to sell houses comparable to houses in neighboring districts, and I think that that is an indicator that there may be, that we may be at the tipping point or perhaps beyond, and I think it's important for us to continue this exercise to see if we can't reasonably get this budget below 2.4.
Yeah, there's likely one slide that, would be missing from this presentation, because really there's two other pieces that, we think that we're at. While there might be some, variances in some of the revenues as we calculated and some other minor expenditure changes, the two big areas are the debt not refunding, debt restructuring and potential staff furloughs. I mean, those are the two big ticket items that will significantly impact the budget and allow us to address either of the tax matters. And that's why when we put in like the second slide on this presentation, the presentation with the three options, three scenarios, we wanted to go back to making sure that everybody understands that we had that discussion, and it ultimately leads us to that. So we can certainly, address that, but the board's got to give us a specific direction on both of those items, because I think they're both options that can be considered. I think that they have to be weighed heavily about what we plan to do into the future, and this is all about making choices. And I said earlier, those three options, I didn't like any of the three options because they come with challenges, but they are. That's why you're elected. That's why I'm appointed. That's why we need to make those decisions. But they're difficult choices. So. We're continuing the process, and hopefully we can, show you something better at our next meeting. But I'm telling you, if we're talking about big items, I think we've gotten through just about everything we can do without, sacrificing program. The next step would be the restructuring and potentially staff furloughs. So that's my comment on that.
Paul?
A couple of comments. To Herb's point about public awareness of the budget and the board members as well, I would like to have something, if we can do something before the middle of May. Mention that before as an idea, but maybe an idea around this, because I'm not sure exactly what Herb you're asking for, but it's almost, as Dr. Zerbe said, a lot of choices. So it's almost like line item voting. And I don't know if that's a way to go or not, but we cannot look at this and just say there's one budget. There's choices along the way. Do you want to do the debt? Do you want to do pay to play? Do you want to do use of facilities? There's not one answer. There's different knobs to turn. So, and Some of us might have different opinions about some and some of the others, and it's not as easy as just having one final solution here. So I don't know how we get through that, and maybe it's going to be harder to do that way, but there might be something that we can do around that. The second point I want to make is I still struggle because this does not have a longer-term view. I understand what Brenda's saying, but we, again, are only looking at 1 year. We are not looking beyond the 1 year. We don't know if we make a decision to not take the Peters exception this year, what that means for us next year. On top of that, we don't know what Harrisburg is going to do to us. We got away with it this year, but we have no idea what the impact of Harrisburg will be one way or another. It could be favorable, could be unfavorable. We don't know. I don't know if I would want to just sort of assume that it's going to be the same. It might end up being better, who knows? I guess the last point I would make here, there's been a lot of hard work. There's a lot of hard choices that have to be made. How we get to make those choices quickly so they can be executed before May 24th so we can have the 30 days, that's an open question that we need to resolve. Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll go real quick here. I just had a question for the transportation subsidy, Stuart, that we got that number. You had mentioned it was based off of 14-15. Was it really based off of last year or this current school year?
It was based off of last year. They used last year's information to generate this year's final subsidy calculation. And the big impact that associated with the increase was 14-15 was the first year with first student. We had 41 buses replaced as a result of the first year. Buses that are aged 10 years and younger receive maximum subsidy. So based upon that component of our first year generated for us additional subsidy, which is reflected in the number that was put on tonight's updated PowerPoint.
Okay. Thank you. And then kind of getting along to what Mr. Winters was saying, that, we do see what's in front of us. We see the budget shortage, and we basically have to decide as a board the direction that we're going. And I think this is what Dr. Zerbe keeps getting at is, there are choices out there, and pretty soon, we need to make sure that we as a board go on record and vote up and down certain items. So it was going to be my recommendation, because we said that there would be no voting during working sessions, but for next week's board meeting, the idea would be is that we need to start looking at the things that are on the table and either voting them on or off, because that is basically what's going to drive. We're not picking scenario A, scenario B, scenario C. It's more the idea of if we vote something off the table, we are automatically pushing ourselves in a certain direction. So the idea would be debt restructuring. Put a resolution, is the board looking to do a debt restructuring for next year with potential savings as X? And we vote up or down that motion for that. Staff furloughs, is the Methacton School Board willing to make staff furloughs to X amount of dollars? Vote up and down on that. And it looks like the only other one is the idea of the elimination of the SRO program. Are we comfortable with the recommendation that was made tonight from Dr. Zerbe? Because we can talk and we can go back and forth, but in order to hit this timeline, it's in the best mindset that I have that we need to give final direction to what we're aiming for before we get to May 24th, because we can't just keep talking about this and not having an actual decision made. We can't be, changing numbers on May 24th. We have to come to that board meeting with what we plan to pass. So it'd be my idea to really push for, this meeting next week, that we have to vote some of these things either up or down, off or on, show our support with who believes what.
Real quick, I just wanted to say, I knew I was missing something. So I just was confused between termination, resignation, and furlough. So now I'm clear. I knew I was missing something. I knew it, so.
So if there aren't any more questions on the budget, I'd like to move on to the rest of the agenda. As you can see on the agenda, there will be a presentation on strategic planning on April 27th. There will be reports by the committee chairpersons, and then there'll be public comment on board action items. And the next item is fiscal matters. Mr. Whiteleather?
Thank you. Couple items on for your review and recommendation for approval for next week. The first item is the employee health care program update. I provided a handout to all of the board members referencing key dates from this Monday through the balance of the year as it pertains to various communications and/or information that would be distributed to employees as we migrate towards our July 1 transition to Aetna and CVS for our employee medical and prescription coverages. The monthly list of bills as presented for your review this evening and approval next week, it was also reviewed by Finance Committee, as well as our Treasurer's Report and our bid summary. This is an annual process that we would go through for various components of our operational needs, ranging from paper, copy paper supplies, art supplies, custodial supplies as well, throughout the organization for the following year. Those bids will be on for your consideration next week for approval. School breakfast and lunch prices on for your approval for next week's meeting. Again, these prices represent a 10-cent increase, which we did speak about as far as how those costs are calculated on an annual basis and why the recommendation of 10 cents was provided for your consideration. Final two items are the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit District Cost Plan. These are the services that we anticipate needing for special education services through the IU for the 16-17 year. While the number is indicated on here, this is not mandatory that we achieve this number. We can obviously come in lesser or greater than this number depending upon the actual need as we revise throughout the year. And then finally, our daily substitute rate, as recommended to your consideration, represents both an increase in the daily rate of $10 for both categories, as well as an adjustment to the number of days before their increases would take effect between the two cost tiers.
Are there any questions on the items that Mr. Whiteleather discussed?
Yeah, and the daily substitute rate, what is the current county average?
Current county average, Mr.
Well, I don't have that right in front of me, but the 95 is representative closely to the average of Tier 1. We looked at the tiers.
Correct.
Tier 1 is that first tier that we've adjusted from 30 to 25 days, and 105. We do have some outliers that are much higher and some that have multiple tiers as well. This gets us to the average in the county, makes us more competitive with our surrounding districts. But again, we certainly aren't on the high side of this.
I have your report here, Mr. Harney. So it says county high for Tier 1 is 195, I'm sorry, 115, and county low for Tier 1 is 80. So then I believe in your report here, the averages would be 95. It's 95 for Tier 1, 105 is the average for Tier 2, 120 is the average for Tier 3. Methacton is currently at Tier 1, $85, Tier 2, $95. And our recommendation is as stated on the agenda.
And I can only assume our troubles of getting subs still continues.
Not just ours, I would say that's everywhere.
Yeah.
Again, the basis of this is really to remain competitive. Our substitutes like coming to Methacton. Our students are well-behaved and very respectful. And so the management of classrooms isn't certainly the issue, but we want to be, we need to have, again, these folks need to make choices. If they're able to go to a neighboring district and make an extra $10 a day on a regular basis, they'll do that because every dollar counts in this particular environment. So we appreciate your support on that. If there are no other questions, we'll move on to personnel items. Mr. Harney?
Yes, we have two resignation administrative for your approval this month. We have one resignation classified. We have one long-term substitute classified. We have one change of status professional for your approval. We have two compensated leave professionals for your approval, one uncompensated leave professional. We have two uncompensated leave classifieds. We have two supplemental contracts for your approval and three additions to our casual on-call or classified substitute list for your approval, and two job descriptions as well.
Any questions on the matters Mr. Harney reviewed?
Just one real quick one. The supplemental contracts for extended season pay. So am I to understand that coaches are only contracted for the league schedule, and if their teams get to postseason play, we got to pay them more?
That is correct.
That's accurate.
Is that typical of all the districts? Is that how it goes?
Each district may have a varying program, but essentially, we put.
Wouldn't we expect our coaches to, get to those levels when we hire them? You know what I mean? It just seems like I'm a little confused that.
Well, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but there's a current program in place that has been standard practice for well over 10 years. That's something that, if we're going to change, will likely require some negotiation.
So this is tied to our.
The rate is tied to it, and the past practice is tied to it.
Okay. I for one would be very interested in understanding how other school districts deal with postseason coach pay.
Any other questions on the items that Mr. Harney reviewed? If not, we'll move on to the next item, which is curriculum programs. Dr. Cotona.
Okay, we are bringing forth the textbook adoption recommendations, which include a textbook, Western Civilization, for a new AP European History course at the high school, two textbooks for two of our iLearn courses, one learned by doing Google Docs, and another for the student certification for this particular course. I also have on here the math books, Math in Focus. There is some more detail here, including how many students and teachers are covered under this, the textbooks, workbooks, manipulatives, 6-year licenses, etc. And three new math textbooks for grades 7 and 8. The Glencoe Course 2, which would be for 70 copies. Each of these three courses actually represents a 5-year purchase option as opposed to a single year, because the single year option ends up costing us more at the end of the time frame. So the Glencoe Course 2 is there as a 5-year option. That also includes, as do the others, online access for the 5 years and any replacement workbooks. The pre-algebra program is also a 5-year option for 290 copies, and the Glencoe Course 3 for grade 8 is 160 copies, and again, 5 years.
Any questions for Dr. Cotona on the items in her list? If not, we're going to move on to the next, and that is policy. The policy committee met this evening, and there will be several first readings on the agenda for the next meeting, but those are the items for second reading. Any issues related to the matters for second reading? If not, we'll move on to the next other. There's a list of gifts and donations that we'll ask for your approval. In addition to the ones listed, there will be an additional one. There will be, we'll recommend to accept a gift in the amount of $10,500 from the Education Foundation for the Methacton community in support of the Methacton High School Marching Band. And we'll also have a check presentation as well in the beginning of the meeting. If we go on, dates for board members is listed, and then there's old business. This evening, I just want to give you information related to the enrollment RFP. We issued an RFP and received 2 vendor responses for which the committee reviewed and determined that the methodology presented in the vendor's responses was far too similar to that of the Pell study and essentially would not suffice for our current needs. I directed the committee to begin seeking vendors that we solicited originally with the RFP that are more closely aligned with what we are attempting to accomplish. We chose to reach out to 2 vendors from the solicited list, and we held phone conversations with both and received their rationale for why they did not respond originally to the RFP, and that was generally around their timeline. They mentioned that they already had a lot of work, and they couldn't meet our initial timeline that we delineated in the RFP. And therefore, we also spoke to them about how their methodology would support the enrollment projection discussions that we have been having. As such, I have 2 committee members here this evening, and I want them to just give you their perspective on what we found, and then leave it to a recommendation potentially for the April 27th meeting. So I have Mr. Andrews and Mr. Sandner. If you gentlemen might come down real quick. And please, be thorough, but it's getting late. I didn't expect to have you here this late, so I apologize. But certainly we want to communicate with the board where we're at.
John Andrews, if this was a baseball game, we would have had the 7th inning stretch by now. We started out with over 20 bidders for the request for proposal that was put out, and we asked for something beyond the standard cohort survival model, which is typically based on historical data and gets more inaccurate as time goes on. So in the last week, we've had phone calls with the Montgomery County Planning Commission. They have a man that works exclusively on doing enrollment projections for districts in the county. He's done, 7 or 8 of them in just a few years. And then Malone and McBroom, that was discussed last year when there was last year's competition. So we've had extensive phone calls with those 2 bidders, and this week Dr. Zerbe has received brief written proposals from each of them. And Andrew Sandner, who's here, and I have reviewed these things and come up with independent recommendations that are not, they're somewhat, each of us is somewhat different in our recommendation, but we agree that these proposals are in line with our needs for long-term projections. And I favor the Malone and McBroom that I refer to as M&M for their novel tailoring of the basic cohort survival model by introducing trends in fertility rates by studying the population of women of various ages, trends in births, thorough analyses by housing types and sending areas, and their planned dialogues with realtors. And M&M, I believe, have a broader and more extensive experience of projections. They've done something like 30 of them in this decade so far across a wide range of districts, typically involving larger communities in Connecticut. And they also have capability and experience at redistricting if we need that, including GIS level detail. At the county, there's one man who's very skilled and productive, whereas at M&M, they have a company-owned or an employee-owned company of about 140 professionals. They do lots of engineering design work for cities and industrial needs, and they have a few people who do their projections. I don't know exactly how many, but versus one here, and they have very good experience at community outreach. That's when you get to the recommendation point, and you are dealing with the community in a myriad of aspects. And like what the county does, their reporting is direct and clear, while they do some what I'd call concealment of their exact analyses by the use of low, medium, and high projections, and that's quite commonly done in the community of enrollment projections. Lastly, M&M would deliver a report in September versus February for the local one. And that's something for the board to consider. I can't make a recommendation relative to that. And I note that some of their staff are familiar with the southeast Pennsylvania area, while their place of activity right now is somewhere in Connecticut. And of course, the Montco planners are well versed in the southeast PA area. I also note we have indications of our enrollment decline being near its end, and growth in the Philadelphia area as a port. The SEPTA rail line into King of Prussia and new twin Bettswood bridges coming in the early 2020 era will lead to substantial economic growth even here in the Methacton area with the increased employment both in Philadelphia and in the King of Prussia area with that planned SEPTA rail line, which is well along. I certainly don't know whether it might be delayed 6 months or 2 years or whatever, but it's got a lot of momentum. And now Andrew will talk to the local planning commission effort that he favors, and then we can attempt to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Andrew Sander, Lower Providence. I guess I have to say that. Just as a preface, thank you, John. And we had our calls last week, and we just met this morning, so there's no fancy presentation or anything. We're really just trying to get you guys up to speed to where we see things right now. As Dr. Zerbe alluded to and John talked about, the socioeconomic trends in our community led us to have the board direct the administration and consolidation committee to find an alternative to the cohort survival method, which I think many people had a problem with earlier on. It's actually much easier said than done. As John talked about, there were over 20 people that we had identified to ask for submissions, and throughout the process it became apparent that all of the vendors we reviewed actually utilized that cohort survival method at some level. So, there was a desire for us to get away from the cohort survival method, I think, completely, but unfortunately it seems as though all the vendors out there use it at some sort of level. The differentiator, though, is how they utilize and modify that model, as well as if and what additional socioeconomic data they take into account. So the majority of the folks really just basically do a cohort survival and make some crude modifications. That's why John and I, like you said, both of these companies we believe are far superior to any of the other companies. But there is one that I think separates itself, and that one is Montgomery County Planning Commission. As background, we did look at our neighbors to see what they were doing. So Lower Merion, Hatboro, Horsham, Perk Valley, Colonial, Lower Moreland, and Upper Merion, and I'm sure some others, recently decided to look at these alternatives and chose the Montgomery County Planning Commission. I believe a lot of the reason for doing this was the unique way in which the Montgomery County Planning Commission does not rely only on the past, no matter how sophisticated or novel the methods are that they're doing it. They actually look at trends going forward. And also because of the rare opportunity to work with a vendor is so completely tied into the local socioeconomic environment, which positions them to best understand the current forces at work, which will affect future enrollments. We have not had a chance to really call any references at this point, so I think that's something that would be important for us to do if we decide to move forward. A review of the Montgomery Planning Commission's reports indicate that, and a lot of those were from those districts that I just said, so our neighboring districts, indicates that they do a great deal of time. They put a lot of time into understanding socioeconomic trends, such as migration patterns. They'll look at new homes. They'll look at transitional of homes. So if there's a resale of a home, what type of person moved out, what type of person moved in? So what would that have as an effect on your enrollments? They look at what are the types of people moving into those homes. So not just young people, what's their nationality? So some nationalities have more tendency to have greater number of children than others. So they get really in-depth in there, and they have a lot of information to look at that. They look at parochial school impact. They look at the impact on the local community, and even other things, such as an example of their in-depth analysis on birth rates. What folks like Malone and McBroom and other agencies have to do is completely rely on data that's a year to a year and a half old that the state gives based on what births have been. They're very late in giving the data. Montgomery County has other ways of looking at where they feel births are going and how people are moving in based on their being the county and have access to lots of different data. So they can do a much better analysis of where they think birth rates are going to be going. So the reports clearly state cause and effect relationships, which is very important, and any assumption used in their analysis, and they're very open to sharing how they came up with their numbers, whereas John talked about there are some black box aspects of the folks at Malone and McBroom. It's also clear that they do have the access to data that no other vendor could have. Let's see, I'm trying to cut it short for you guys, so I have to put everything. Again, the big thing for me is that Malone and McBroom, even though they use some sophisticated algorithms, they tend to rely much more on historic data and come up with correlations that they've seen that impacted past enrollments. And if we remember, one of the biggest problems that the community had with the PEL study and the cohort survival method as a whole was its reliance on the past and not taking into consideration current and future socioeconomic trends. I'm going to skip through a lot of stuff. One of the things we're also looking at doing is creating a relationship with somebody on a long-term basis. So in our suggestions, we said, hey, give us a price and give us a price if we would use you every 2 years, so that we can stay on top of trends and maybe see things moving forward. Well, obviously, I think Montgomery County would have a lot more input and idea as to what future trends might be and the information that might affect us than a Malone and McBroom. But also, just from a relationship standpoint, the original proposal for Malone and McBroom charged $18,000 for the projection. In their updated proposal, after we reached out to them, and I believe they realized that we didn't have any viable alternatives, they changed that number to $33,000 for the same service. So while that might not be enough of a sway to say we should do one or another, and by the way, Montgomery County is like less than $10,000, so it's more than 200% difference. It just shows to me what a relationship is to them. It's just something to point out. Malone and McBroom does do most of their work in Connecticut and have done a number more studies than the folks in Montgomery County have. And they're very well aware of the unique problems in their current environment. And while variety is good, you got to realize that Montgomery County really focuses on Montgomery County, focuses on our neighboring school districts. And when you look at the online and you look at the reports, and because I was so involved in this, I looked at what the communities thought of the reports. Their reports are very well received by their communities. They do a good job of explaining the data. There's no black box. There's no secret formula. This is it. This is what we're doing. We give you the assumptions. Here, board, there are 5 scenarios. You guys choose the one you want to make the decision on. So I think it's a much more clear-cut, easy way for a board to make a decision with the analysis that they provide. We talked to the individual who, as John said, there's only one person who would actually be doing the study. The person actually lives in one of the districts that he did a study for. He lives in Montgomery County, works in Montgomery County, and one of the things that I really liked about that is, as you look at their reports, they're very good, and they've actually gotten better as they go along. Whereas with Malone and McBroom, there are 140 people, and there's a number of people, we don't know who we're going to get to do the actual work. And the only person we've dealt consistently on has been their salesperson. And that salesperson obviously has a profit motive, whereas Montgomery County does not have a profit motive, which is quite obvious in the cost that they're charging. So that's something I think we need to keep in mind as far as the relationship. So in summary, I think it comes down to two things. Do we want to look more at the past like we did when making the decision to invest in Skyview or the way PEL did their analysis, or do we want to look more at the current environment and look in the future? So let's stop looking in the rearview mirror and look forward. Let's see what we're going to do. And number two, do we want to take advantage of a vendor who's really immersed in our local economic and socio and demographic and really has a stake in a successful long-term relationship?
Thank you, Mr. Sander, and thank you, Mr. Andrews. So what I need to do is, because it was earlier this week that I received information from the Montgomery County Planning Commission. It was just this afternoon that I received the information from Malone and McBroom. I want to bring forth a recommendation after I look at what the impact will be in a potential timeline shift. Because it appears that it'll be difficult for us to meet the timeline associated with choosing either of those two vendors that I had originally presented. And therefore, I may or may not have a recommendation at next Wednesday's meeting, but I will confer with the rest of the committee, and if I'm confident that I can bring something forward, I will have it on the agenda. All right, with all this other supporting information. All right. So under new business, we have 2016 board goals. Because in the absence of our board president, I was asked to move that to next week for discussion. So that gives us to courtesy of the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. Courtesy of the floor. Anyone like to go first? Mr. Andrews?
John Andrews, Lower Providence. The budget is on all of our minds, and I think that I have a few thoughts to offer. One is, I still think that there's excess staffing at the high school from the standpoint that the number of teachers there, which is something like 128, is the same as it was when we had 200 more students there. And maybe it's just that we're comfortable with cutting the average class size, let's say from 21 to 18, because it's so difficult to put together a schedule. And I think that, we ought to be asking the principal there, when will the master schedule be available? And can it be available to directors or to administrators at Farina to possibly impact this budget in a healthy way? It seems like the debt restructuring, which is, delaying debt payments that we signed up as obligations and adding to interest, is slowly getting taken off the table, and I personally think that's a good thing. I think with regard to continuing to work this budget, if the CFO chooses to take 20 vacation days relative to his other employment, that may do harm to us. I don't think at a real busy time of the year when people get an easy summer, I don't think this is the right time for up to 20 vacation days. With regard to the ESCO debt item, I think the number is something over $100,000 a year, and it seems to me that we should be reminded that should be counterbalanced by electric and natural gas and fuel oil charges of at least that amount. With regard to the Chromebooks, I have two thoughts. One is that if you have something like 1,600 Chromebooks just at the high school, it would seem to me that someone's going to come forward and say, well, we need one person to manage them or charge them up every other day or whatever. That's you know, they don't care for themselves other than shutting off before the battery totally dies. And with regard to the Chromebooks, the 3-year lease time, the last I knew, most years are 365 days, but only 180 of those are school days. So, have we established the lifetime of a Chromebook out in industrial use or in continuous use or in school district use? I think the technology of computers is quite advanced, and part of that is making them more reliable. So I think we ought to be looking at we ought to be looking at the cost of maybe a 4-year lease as an alternative to a 3-year lease. And perhaps with the ERIP program, if there's only 4 or 5 people signed up for it and our requirement was for 15, maybe we should drop it, because a few of those people are going to take retirement no matter what. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kim O'Donnell, Lower Providence. I have no questions about the budget. I'm going to focus on Dr. Katona. Dr. Katona, sorry. Question.
Could you please say your name and...
Kim O'Donnell, sorry.
And township. Sorry, just for the record, and township.
Lower Providence.
Thank you.
I am reaching out to see the everyday math is going to be replaced for K through 4. And I have a concern. I have a second grader who has been going through the math with everyday math. How do we anticipate the transition for our children who are in, say, second and third grade that are going to have something totally different for the next 2 years?
We are going to start with the professional development for our teachers so that they understand how to take the students from what they're doing now into something different. And we're going to start with that at the end of this school year, and then pick up with it again at the beginning of next school year, and have a couple of other of our in-service days devoted to it. So we've been in contact with other districts that have made a similar transition, some that have in fact gone from everyday math to math and focus. And certainly there's a learning curve. There's a learning curve for teachers, there's a learning curve for students. We are also going to have parent universities where we will have evening workshops for parents as well. So from all of the information that we're getting from other districts that have implemented this, if you really put your focus on making sure that all of the key players are getting the professional development, the insight that they need to help the students, then the transition is a lot smoother.
Okay. Is there any talk or anything about allowing our current second and third graders to just continue out with everyday math until they go on to Skyview? Is that an option?
We can't really do that because one of the one of the greatest motivators in terms of looking at other options for the students was the fact that what we're currently using with the everyday math is not core aligned, and we're trying to Band-Aid what we're doing with some of the skills. And so we really need something for them that is going to be able to help the teachers deliver everything that they need to the students.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. Motion to adjourn? Kim, second. Brenda? All right. Thank you very much. Have a nice night, everyone.